Yay, yay. It's Wednesday, and that was the awkwardest intro ever. Just as a reminder, guys, nothing that I say today is medical advice, nor should be taken as medical advice. I'm simply a nutritionist who nerds out on these things, as do you, because you're here. But make sure that you understand it's not for a treatment or diagnosis or any of that kind of stuff. Make sure you also just use common sense and take your own case into account and maybe do some research on your own and kind of, go down and chase, kind of point yourself in the right direction today and then go find what you're looking for. Because, everyone's struggling with different stuff and health is not always easy or straightforward. It's sometimes kind of complicated. Sorry, I'm like in an awkward mood today, so everything I say just comes out awkward. Okay, so I'm going to get to those pre-submitted questions, and then I see you guys are asking your questions. I'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. Let's see. Context. I was hypothyroid when I started eating pro-metabolic. Within 3 months, I was off NDT. But this last week, I feel like I've gone hyperthyroid, hot, anxious, low stress tolerance, especially in the afternoon. I upped my sugar a little in the last week, which felt great at first. I felt like I needed more. And I always balance with protein and fat. So I'm wondering if there could be other things at play here. Question, could just increasing sugar really put my thyroid in overdrive? Am I missing another piece? Any ideas? A lot of times the piece that people are missing are minerals, magnesium, potassium. Those are kind of the things that people are overlooking and not recognizing that as we speed up our metabolism, our need for nutrients increases. And so sometimes we're thinking in terms of energy, food, sugar, carbs, fat, protein, and we're forgetting nutrients, liver, oysters, B vitamins, the minerals like copper, zinc, magnesium, potassium, sodium. So sometimes those are kind of the things that are missing. And as our metabolism speeds up, our need for those nutrients actually increase, and calcium. Calcium is one of the most important that I think a lot of people overlook as well. So those are kind of like whenever someone's feeling like that, like their adrenals are going into overdrive, a lot of times it is minerals. Let's see. Would love to know if you have any tips for boosting DHEA naturally through diet. Recent blood test showed I'm low, end of normal, and doc has suggested I take a DHEA supplement, but I'd rather not as I'm worried about potential side effects. I got terrible cystic acne when I came off long-term BCP and have worked so hard to clear it naturally. It's only just starting to heal. My estrogen levels are slightly low and I'm having very light periods since stopping the pill, hence wanting to boost DHEA. Yeah, DHEA is a precursor for both estrogen and testosterone. So, of course, I could see why you want to boost it. Remember that DHEA is made in the adrenals. And so oftentimes if DHEA is low, the body is stressed. The adrenal glands need nutrients. Remember, the adrenals have a high need for sodium, potassium, vitamin C. The adrenals are a lot of times under stress when we're not eating frequently or keeping blood sugar balanced. So those are remember, the adrenals don't just pump out cortisol or adrenaline. They also pump out a lot of different hormones, like up to 50, I think, or around 50. So we have to remember that if any of our adrenal hormones are high or low, our adrenals are either working overtime or have already worked overtime. Because oftentimes when you find someone who has, like, let's say low cortisol or low DHEA, at one time it was very elevated. And now they're feeling like they're in the trash can, but at one point they weren't. And so think about adrenals that are overworking for years and years and years. And then now they're only working when they absolutely have to. And it's because they're conserving nutrients and energy. Hi, Jess. Are there any benefits to taking aspirin? Sometimes a bedtime snack or even a meal doesn't seem to help me go to sleep. I am still wired but tired. Could aspirin help? I've never heard of aspirin for the use of like relaxing. For me, it does make me feel kind of warm and happy. It helps with my inflammation for sure, but it doesn't necessarily help me relax. The things that help me relax the most, like L-theanine. I love L-theanine. I think that L-theanine is like, it's not an upper or a lower, like it just feels like I'm more balanced. That's my personal favorite adaptogen. I know some other popular ones are like rhodiola, ashwagandha, holy basil, also called tulsi, ginseng is popular. I also really like glycine and inositol. Glycine is very relaxing, and then inositol is very helpful at like increasing dopamine. So those are all kind of like my favorites. And I use a blend of some of those before bed. Like my favorite before bed relax kind of concoction is inositol, glycine, L-theanine, and magnesium. And that like knocks me out. It really relaxes me because sometimes I'm going from a really stressful day. Like for example, today, I've worked all day. I'm doing a live until, usually around 6:30 or 7. And then I have to like relax and get to bed. Sometimes that's really hard. So those are the times when I really need it most, and it works really well. Let's see, one more. Do you know anything about the cause of cysts and lipomas? It seems to me that like when I eat more fat, they come about. Looking for a natural solution that treats the root cause. You discuss this in your course. Thanks so much. I don't discuss those two things in my course that as much. I do talk about how estrogen is a hormone of growth and cellular proliferation, which is why a lot of times women get ovarian cysts or other types of cysts, even skin cysts, when they're the most estrogen dominant. I know I personally struggled with cysts, specifically like I had one on my tailbone, and also like I had random ones kind of popping up when I was super estrogen dominant. And now I kind of know it had a lot to do with like my gut bacteria and also the fact that I just had a lot of estrogen. But lipomas is more interesting because it is like a fatty growth. And I don't know much about them, but I'm curious if there is like a hormonal component, because I have heard a lot of women with PCOS having them. Do you have any advice on finding the right amount and type of carbs, or are temps and pulses enough? We kind of have to figure out what works for us and how we feel and go by our sleep, our energy, our muscle building, all of the factors. Temps and pulses are not enough. Temps and pulses are just two of the many markers of if we're doing well. How's our hair growth? How's our gut health? How's our skin? How's our sleep? How is our exercise? Like, how are we recovering? How's our moods? Mood stability is huge. And then just overall like blood sugar balance in general. Those are all factors that I take into account. But I usually don't think anyone should really go below 150 grams of carbs, because the adrenals, that's like where the adrenals really start to take a hit. If I can't access Great Lakes gelatin brands of the highest quality, do you think it's better to use gelatin for the local supermarket for gummies rather than nothing at all? Yeah, for sure. I would just use whatever I have available to me always. As far as temps and pulses go, what does it mean if temps are low but pulses run high? Stress, remember, anytime pulses are high, that usually means we have adrenaline. Remember, when we're under stress, running from an angry bear, our body's going to pump more blood to our muscles that we need for survival, or our organs that we need for survival, like our muscles, like our lungs, like our heart. And when we are in a relaxed state, we want enough nutrients, aka blood flow, getting to our tissues without causing our body to be in a stressed out state constantly. Hi, Jessica. I'm having my first period since implementing Fully Nourished. Started making changes after last month's period, and it came earlier than usual by about 5 days, but I had some weird symptoms, extreme fatigue, nausea, or insomnia, that I don't usually experience. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on how to know if you're heading in a good direction despite having another rough cycle. Hope this makes sense. Usually, the rough periods come for about 3 months or 3 total cycles after women implement Fully Nourished. I know this was the case for me, and I occasionally will have a detoxy period. Not so much anymore, but when probably like the first 2 years of going pro-metabolic, the first 3 or 4 cycles were really, really rough. And then like I would feel really good. And then occasionally I would have like a weird detoxy cycle. And I allow space for that because I know that our period is a way for the body to detox. And so for me, I know that if my body is shifting and changing things, it's going to use whatever outlet it needs. And that's like, I'm totally cool with that. But we of course like long-term want to have better period smooth cycles. So I usually say give it 90 to 100 days. That's why I talk about the 100-day wait in Fully Nourished. I want you guys to know what to expect. That's in the what to expect lesson, just because it's like one of those things where when we start to implement changes, we can be really excited. And then we're like, oh my gosh, like, is this normal? And usually like the first 90 days can be up or down. Some women immediately feel better. Some women are like, I feel better in some ways, but like my periods are really ridiculous. Hi, I'm new here, but I find your page so helpful, and I've already implemented some changes that you suggest. I apologize if you've answered this before, but I have class tonight, so I can't attend the Q&A. But my question is, do you moisturize yourself neck and face with shea butter as well, or just your body? And this is a really stupid question, haha, but is raw milk just organic milk? Thank you. Yeah, so I moisturize my whole body with shea butter, including my face. I don't like to use shea butter in the morning, only in the evening, just because it's so greasy, but it's a nice moisturizer. But yes, I use it all over my body. And then raw milk is milk that's unpasteurized. Usually raw milk tends to be like organic, grass-fed, but not always. So it's high quality milk is more important than it being raw. Like if it's raw, but they're not fed well, like I personally wouldn't chance it. Do you recommend taking either magnesium bisglycinate or beef liver capsules with or without food? Right now I take both right after meals, thanks. I tend to think supplements do better when people take them with meals, because think about it. If you were like getting those foods or nutrients from your food, a lot of times your body would be digesting while absorbing and assimilating those nutrients. Unless something is specifically, there's a specific purpose for taking it without food, I think taking most things with food is usually a good idea. Hi, Jessica. What are some reasons for having more underarm odor than usual besides nerves or stress? Could it be a vitamin or mineral deficiency? Sometimes it has to do with gut bacteria. You know, the microbiome really regulates body odor. But another factor is, like, remember the lymph system and the lymphatic fluid or interstitial fluid is a carrier of toxins. It's part of our IMMUNE system. And so it's helping the body eliminate toxins through the sweat. And our body odor is there for a reason. Our armpits sweat for a reason. We actually have lymph nodes right here near our breasts, and lymph nodes' purpose is to eliminate toxins and pathogens from the body. And so, you know, when we're sweating out BO, there's something that our body is trying to get rid of. Now, what is it? Well, for a lot of women who are going through hormonal shifts, like a lot of times this is iron can be a factor, and so can estrogen. And estrogen and iron are often interrelated. So when women are detoxing, they often find that they are a lot stinkier, and then it goes back to normal once they kind of have supported their liver. But I know for me personally, I love using the detox lemonade that I talk about in both Fully Nourished or on my Instagram page under PMS SOS. That really works wonders for me when I'm experiencing any kind of like extra detox. And I know, like, when I eat kind of crappy or when I'm not supporting my body as I should, I do tend to smell some BO. Chatted with a practitioner today, and we determined I definitely have some gut issues. Unfortunately, the $1,400 to work with her and get a GI map test done isn't in my budget right now. Any more budget-friendly alternatives to find out what's going on? Would your gut course help shed some light? It probably will. You know, it's one of those things where testing can be really, really helpful. However, if you don't know what to do with the test, it sometimes feels like the test was useless, or, you know, it also sometimes can feel like you will run one test and it'll give you some information, but then you want some more. So I personally, like, I've run a lot of gut tests in my lifetime. I've spent a lot of money on gut healing, probably in the like tens of thousands of dollars, like upwards of like 40 grand. And I can say now, like, without a doubt, like, probably the most helpful tests that I ever ran was a GI map, an organic acids test. But honestly, could I have done what I did with my gut without them? Yeah. I mean, unless you're someone that really wants to tailor for your own microbiome, I personally think that you usually can figure out pretty good what's going on based on your symptoms. Most people have fungus. Most people have bacterial overgrowth. Most people with those two things often have parasites as well. And so if you know that and you understand those things, and then you understand that a lot of times these pathogens are hidden behind biofilms, it's kind of one of those things where, you know, okay, I need to nourish my body to make sure it can handle the detoxification of these pathogens and the breakdown of these pathogens. Then I need to break down biofilms. Then I need to start working on fungus. I need to start working on bacteria. And then I got to work on the bigger stuff like parasites. I think doing the smaller stuff first is usually a good plan, because oftentimes the larger guys are using the smaller guys as kind of protection. Have I ever seen a practitioner work like that? No, because they're often just treating the test. I often see that. And I just don't think that gut tests are comprehensive enough to do that. There are certain tests that can be comprehensive enough, even though I believe fully and working on the person and not the test. A lot of practitioners say that they're going to work on the person, but then when they see the stuff on the test, they often just start working on the test. And the test can give you a lot of clues, but it doesn't tell you everything. And a lot of times practitioners act like it's telling you everything you need to know. So that's just a long way of saying, like, even the GI map, as wonderful as the test is, it has a lot of holes. And there is no gut or stool test that's going to test all the funguses you need to test. And so most women are struggling with fungus. Most women are struggling with some type of bacterial overgrowth, but we have to determine, is that of adrenal origin? Because if we're stressed out, our stomach acid is going to be low, and then our pancreas is not going to be secreting enzymes or, neutralizing stomach acid with bicarbonate. Maybe our gallbladder isn't secreting bile properly. And so I have a very specific way that I go about helping gut health overall. Does that mean it's going to fix everything? Not always. Gut health can really be kind of like this layered issue, where you start working on other things and then other things start to pop up and you have to actually like rewind a little bit and work on those things again. But in reality, like, I think the reason why I'm making a gut course is I want you guys to be aware of what's going on. So as things pop up on your gut healing journey, you really know how to go about doing these things, mostly yourself. And if you are working on it with a practitioner, you have some knowledge that you can bring up with them, and you can kind of know when like something's not going to actually be a good decision for your body. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, nourished gut is going to, the goal, I'm not going to encourage you to not work with a practitioner, because some people do need to work with practitioners for sure. But I want to give you a lot of insight on how to deal with a lot of gut issues on your own. And then also be kind of aware of things that I've learned along the way and I've seen with hundreds of clients along the way. Has this lifestyle healed rosacea? For me, my rosacea was like 100% histamine related, as well as being inflammation related. So as my inflammation has gone down, as my histamine issues have gone down, so has my rosacea. I used to wish I had more pictures, but obviously when you have like really, really red cheeks, or when your heat intolerance is at its worst, you don't really want to take pictures of it. I wish I didn't have my red light on right now, but I still have like this kind of like large bursted blood vessel from having rosacea that hasn't gone away. And I just wanted to show you guys, like, yes, I did used to have really bad rosacea, and it's not like perfect. Like sometimes the redness will pop up when I'm like really stressed out and not taking care of myself. For the most part, like my rosacea has really diminished quite a bit. Jessica, your hair always looks so beautiful. Do you bleach or dye it, or would you avoid it while trying to heal your hormones? Personally, when I was first healing my hormones, I'm not going to lie to you, I did take a break from dyeing my hair for 9 months. To say that that wasn't a rough time, like it totally was. I have naturally like pretty light hair. It's not blonde like this, that's for sure. This is bleach. But when it's growing out, it's not as harsh, but it was definitely like a harsh line, and it probably grew out to like here. And it was not when ombre hair was cool. So, but I just made the choice. Like, I just didn't really want to expose myself to chemicals. And then I found a new hairstylist that was a little bit more, I guess, conservative with the way that she goes about coloring. So she doesn't use like natural hair dyes. She says that they just don't work very well, but she does like do a lot of specific practices to protect my hair from harsh chemicals. So for example, she never bleaches the same hair twice. Whenever she's adding bleach to my hair, she always does it on virgin hair. We do it very specifically. So I do sections of my hair. It's kind of an illusion, like to make it look like my hair is always fresh. But in reality, I'm often like picking and choosing parts of my head that we're going to highlight. And so that I'm not just like slathering bleach on my hair constantly. So it is a little bit of I have to keep up with it, and it's a lot more work to do it this way, but I just like to have blonder hair, and I feel better that way. Like, it makes me happy. So it's like the one not so natural thing I do in my life. Like, I can't think of anything else that I really use chemicals with, like in my home or on my skin or in my hair, except for that. Best ways to achieve optimal vitamin D levels without supplementing if I live in a cooler climate with less sun. Well, remember, our body like stores up fat-soluble vitamins very, very well. Vitamin D being one of them, but it needs to have the proper raw materials to make hormone D, which remember, vitamin D is a hormone, to make hormone D when we do have summer. So remember, the storage form of vitamin D, which oftentimes is what they're testing when you go to the doctor or whatever, that's the storage form that your body stores up during the summer to last you through the winter. There's a reason why it's really low towards March, April, May, when you've gone all winter long without a bunch of sun. It's because your body's using the storage, the stores that you've built up. But magnesium is particularly important for making vitamin D. And I would say 95% of the population is magnesium deficient. And so this is a problem. This is why so many people are so deficient in vitamin D. It's a magnesium deficiency. So, the long goal would be to get our magnesium stores up. The short goal is to get as much sun as possible or red light. Personally, there are a lot of people that are just so anti-vitamin D. I don't think there's anything wrong with, especially if you're in that weird limbo place where you're very low in vitamin D, you don't have access to sunlight, you're still magnesium deficient. I personally like to use I used to use Carlson's drops of vitamin D on my skin, a very low dosage. I just think I just felt better that way. I know a lot of people will say oh, it's stress hormones. And I always have more to learn. Maybe I'll change my opinion on that at one point. But as of now, I think that as long as someone's not mega dosing, I truly think that a little bit here and there while we're working on the root cause of the vitamin D deficiency is probably okay. Hi, Jessica. What type of foods remedies do you recommend for hair growth and strengthening hair? Thanks for all your help. The first thing is to balance your blood sugar and work on your metabolism. When our stress hormones are high and our thyroid function is low, which they are, if stress hormones are high, thyroid function is low, then that is going to play a big role on the hair follicles. We have to kind of think of hair follicles as these amazing structures. They're kind of like little mini organs. They have a high need for energy, lots of carbohydrates, high need for certain minerals and nutrients like magnesium and zinc. They're very, very, very interesting little, I almost like to call them organelles, like mini organs. And the body really makes them go dormant very quickly when it doesn't have enough resources to grow hair. This is why we have 3 growing phases. We have this active growing, then we have the resting phase, and then we actually have the shedding phase. And a lot of people who are in this very high stress state when their body doesn't have enough raw materials are actively in the shedding phase or the resting phase, and their body's taking a long time getting into that growing phase. Or it's just not getting into the growing phase because it's trying to conserve resources. Now, this is very common during winter, and I talk very often about women who eat high polyunsaturated fat diets or women with PCOS being in a constant state of winter. Isn't it interesting that women who have PCOS struggle with hair loss and our hair doesn't grow very much in the winter? We're not going to actively grow new hairs in the winter. I just find that very fascinating. So that's my long way of saying, make sure you're getting the right amount of nutrients, the right amount of energy, and you're not making your body decide or choose if it has to survive or grow hair. And then once that's happening and you're actively trying to, okay, I've stopped my shedding, that's the first goal, is I'm not losing an excess amount of hair, which often happens just when you're eating to support your metabolism. Once that happens, I think there are certain things we can do to actively start to boost hair growth. One of the main things is minerals, things like potassium, magnesium, sodium, zinc, copper. Those are all really important minerals for hair growth. This is why I love grass-fed beef liver. This is why I love oysters, whether they're fresh or supplemental. I love focusing on getting plenty of magnesium and potassium because these are really important minerals, not just for hair growth, but for allowing the thyroid hormone to get into the cell. And what's the thyroid hormone? Determine metabolism and energy production. So those are kind of my favorite is minerals. And then a topical application, I really find that aspirin and niacinamide work really, really well. Vitamin B3, which is niacinamide, and then aspirin, which is salicylic acid. I have made a solution, a topical solution, which is just hot water with aspirin powder and niacinamide powder dissolved in it. And I just spray it on my scalp. It can be a little drying, but it works really, really well when paired with red light. I just recently found Noelle Covery's brand, Forever Healthy Hair, and she actually has like a tincture that is the aspirin and niacinamide. So it works really well, and I've been using hers just because I'm lazy and sometimes I don't like to make stuff myself, especially when people are doing it better than I am. But it's easily made yourself if you have the time. But those are kind of the things that I do. And then once a week, I like to nourish my hair. So I will spray some rose water or like the probiotic spray that I actually shared on my stories today on my scalp. And then I'll moisturize my scalp to lock in that moisture with usually like some shea butter or some tallow and leave it in overnight. And then I'll just wash my hair like normal. So I'm definitely going to do a YouTube video kind of just showing like, I'll probably do like a 3-part series talking about like my topical solutions, what I do internally, and then also like what I use for hair care, just so you guys have that. And I've been looking into using Organic Olivia's Made Magic, mostly because I'm just like very curious. You know what they say about curiosity, like it totally kills the cat. But sometimes like I can't help myself, but sometimes I like to do experiments. So once I'm done with my Ovasitol experiment, I'm 3 months in with that. Once I'm done with the Ovasitol experiment, and I make you guys a YouTube video on that, I'm gonna do a Made Magic experiment and take Made Magic for 6 months and tell you guys what happens. Any thoughts on Agent Natura's marine collagen with pearl powder supplement? I'm not a big fan of marine collagen. I just don't see the reason when you can do bovine collagen. A lot of people are worried about heavy metals in bovine collagen, but I think that the heavy metal load is probably worse in marine collagen. So I don't see the point, but I know some people have different, like, they want to intake different collagens, and I totally understand that. Pearl powder is awesome. I take it as a calcium supplement. I think it's like a great face mask when you mix it with honey. It's like a kind of a fun supplement to have, but it's very rich in minerals, specifically calcium. Severely malnourished, underweight, but suspect deeper issues, potential SIBO, SIFO, mold. Is it not worth it to test until I get my metabolism up? Because I can't treat what until I'm more stable, catch 22. Yeah, so from my experience, I was trained like very functionally. So, I've trained in a lot of different protocols, SIBO, SIFO, mold. I've been trained in a lot of different things like autoimmune stuff, fasting, like all these different things. And when I implemented these with clients, they would work into a point, and that's what really turned me on to the pro-metabolic sphere, because it just really made sense to me that you don't try to push a body or heal a body until it has the raw materials it needs to function properly. So I'm not going to redo a bathroom in a house and make it look beautiful when the walls are rotting from being flooded. You know what I mean? So it's like, you've got to build the foundation first, and then you can start tweaking everything. But how do you know if something's even working if your body doesn't even have the basic raw materials it needs to function on a day-to-day basis? And then what so many people find is they start to nourish themselves, and then they're like, oh my gosh, 90% of my issues have cleared up. And that's really the point, is like, a lot of our issues begin because we're undernourishing, and then the issues become their own beast, in the sense of like, now the issues are driving more metabolic issues. So I'm the first to agree that there are certain issues, like let's say SIBO or SIFO, that sometimes get so bad that they do have to be dealt with. But I don't understand the mentality of restricting while you heal so that you can reintroduce. Like, I'm like, try to restrict the least amount of things that you need to while you heal, and then work on the SIBO, SIFO. And even if it takes you a little bit longer, but you can nourish more, overall, the healing will be much, much bigger and much more rewarding. I hope that makes sense. But I just don't understand why we would try to heal an issue when we're not even providing our body the energy or raw materials it needs to detoxify or eliminate waste, which I think those are kind of like the two main problems that most people have when they have gut issues, is they're just not moving their bowels enough, and stuff's just sitting there rotting, fermenting. It's called metabolic toxemia or endotoxemia. It's been around, people have been researching it since the early 1900s. And a lot of people don't realize that doctors like in the early 1900s, if we weren't pooping 3 times a day, they would call that an issue. And it would lead to other issues over time. And I think that's kind of why most people are suffering at this point. Do you have to eat red meat a lot or just a little? I don't think you have to do anything. I personally probably eat it like once a day, just because I don't like to eat a lot of poultry. What is a good blood sugar range to stick around when using a blood glucose monitor? Well, blood glucose monitors aren't super accurate all the time, depending on what type that you have. But the interesting thing is a lot of people are obsessed with the numbers, and it's more about context. Like, we don't want our blood sugar skyrocketing and then dropping super low and then skyrocketing and dropping super low. But, you want to make sure you're clearing your glucose after a meal. However, a lot of people don't realize you can clear your glucose into fat cells. So, that's why we don't just look at numbers. But I would say, like, I would want to stay in a range of like between meals, 90, I guess like 70 to 100, but I feel like 70 is a little low. Fasting, like, I would probably say like my ultimate goal would be in between 80 and 90, maybe a little higher, like maybe it'll be like 93 or 94. And then after a meal, like right after a meal, usually like around 130, 140, but then you want to drop back to that like fasting rate. But what you don't want to see, like I said, is like dropping super low and then super high and then super low and super high. I think staying in a good fasting range. Again, like I said, I think like 80 to 90 is good. I mean, some people will say like 70, but I don't know. For some people, I think that's too low. And then upwards, like you don't want to skyrocket after a meal. I think like 120, 130, maybe 140 is okay, as long as it's clearing. When making eggshell powder, are you supposed to take out the shell membrane before grinding it? Yes, it's much easier that way. You don't have to though. Like sometimes if you dry it out enough, like it is fine. It will grind right up. How do you feel about using Dissolve-It-All at the beginning of gut healing protocols as well as wild oregano? Yeah, I think like systemic enzymes work really, really well to break up biofilms, as does lauricidin. Those are kind of my two favorites for biofilm busters, but you could probably find, like, I love the website. Well, I don't love it, but the website Self-Hacked sometimes has some interesting lists, and they have like a crazy long list of biofilm breakers on there. I mean, even apple cider vinegar is technically a biofilm breaker. Anything that's antibacterial or antifungal will technically break up biofilms. It's just going to take time. This is why, like, when people first start taking antibacterials or antifungals, they will feel fine, and then all of a sudden they'll start to feel worse, like at the 6-week mark. It's because they've broken up some of those biofilms, and now the fungus is actually being reached and it's dying. So that's just something to remember. There's a lot of biofilm breakers, but some of my favorites are diatomaceous earth, Dissolve-It-All, or like systemic enzymes like serrapeptase, nattokinase, those types of things. And then I like lauricidin as well. Or really, it's lauricidin is lauric acid or monolaurin tablets. They're like these little like capsules. And then wild oregano, I mean, it's a very good antibacterial, antifungal. However, I try to warn people that when they use too high of doses for too long, sometimes pathogens get used to it and it becomes less effective. So I don't personally think doing like high doses long-term is a good idea. You're going to wipe out certain strains and then you're going to create space for other strains to come back. So it's good to varietize. If we eat like a more lean part of chicken like breast and get rid of the fat before cooking, will this be PUFA free? And would this apply to other meats like pork as well? Yep. And that's why, like, I think higher PUFA meats probably should be eaten a little on the lower fat cuts. Like you said, like pork and chicken, the lower fat cuts are usually a little bit better. Personally, I like chicken thighs a lot more than I like chicken breast. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just cook the chicken thighs on like a rack and let the fat fall into like a cookie sheet or a baking sheet and then just discard the fat because I just think they're a little bit more tender and like good to eat. Does lamb liver have too much vitamin A for my little body? Lamb is the best quality liver I can get from a local 100% grass-fed farm. I think any liver that we can get that's local and high quality is usually a good idea. You just kind of want to be careful, like to not overdo it on any liver. I think the equivalent of like 4 to 6 ounces a week, around there, obviously not perfect for everyone, is usually a good goal. Why am I able to digest some grass-fed dairy like milk and cheese, but get super bloated after eating cottage cheese? Because all dairy products are different. That's why like I hate when people demonize dairy or like automatically just say like dairy is inflammatory. It's because every type of dairy is really a different food. You know, cottage cheese is a very different food than yogurt. So the cheese curds that are left over from our pure casein. And so some people don't digest casein very well. Like whereas milk is going to be a mixture of whey, casein, lactose, water, like it has a bunch of different proteins and sugars in it. And then cheese is usually casein, but sometimes less high in casein if it's a harder cheese. So some people can't digest casein, but they can digest whey just fine. Some people can't digest whey, but can digest casein just fine. So all different milk products are going to be responded to differently by different people. Best brand of cheese to start off eating. Is the brand of parm you get have enzymes or anything in it? I just try to get like a higher quality Parmesan. I think the one that I get has animal rennet in it. I try to avoid enzymes when I can, but remember guys, if you're stressed about eating a food, you are going to react to that food. So if you're asking questions like, what should I start out eating? Like, oh no, that's probably not going to be the best headspace to reintroduce a food in. It should be an enjoyable experience, something that you've been looking forward to a long time, something that you're going to just enjoy and savor. And that's going to probably, your body's probably going to respond to that a lot better than if you're like, oh no, I'm like going to put like 1 ounce of Parmesan cheese on this and like pray to God that I don't react to it. That's just my 2 cents on that. What is the best soap to use on the body and why? I heard bar soap or tallow isn't good on the skin, so I'm confused. Also, what's the best to clean the vag? I think the least amount of soap we can use on the skin is better. Honestly, like I think just cleaning the pits and the bits is a good plan. And then if you need like a little washing once in a while using some mild soap, like I like to use a goat's milk soap, honestly, that I usually will just support some small different brands on Etsy. There's like some really fun soaps on Etsy, and like I just love supporting little businesses when I can. So those are kind of some things that I will have fun and splurge on. I mean, they're not really splurges, but I just like to, that someone made it by hand and put love and care into it. But usually I'm looking for animal fats when possible. A lot of soaps are made with like olive oil, which I just overlook. Like I don't really care, but they tend to have like tallow or lard in them. And that's kind of like what my goal is, or goat's milk. Like I like goat's milk soap. Because it has the butyric acid, which is, it kind of is a gentle acid to kind of be an acid exfoliant. But I also like the Olivia Prebiotic Body Cleanse, which doesn't really mess with the microbiome at all. And they have some really good smelling ones. Like I love the honeysuckle flavor. But yeah, you don't really want to disrupt the microbiome on the skin too much. Like it's not really meant to be disrupted. We're kind of like meant to interact with our environment, and we don't want to be constantly cleaning it off every day, unless we live in like a really polluted place or a place where we are getting like lots of gross nasties on our body, then of course. But in reality, we want to interact with our environment a little bit. We want to interact with microbes, but I tend to like wash my feet and then I say like pits and bits. I think the Olivia body wash is great for washing the vaginal area, or I should say the outside of the vagina, to not disrupt the microbiome too much. I also like to use like my probiotic body spray that I talked about today. I know I'm like plugging it, like I don't know why, but I do spray it kind of like in there, and that really helps with my microbial balance, as well as doing like a diluted warm apple cider vinegar rinse. Like I find that can be very beneficial as well. I just like to introduce like beneficial microbes so that my vaginal microbiome can stay really, really clean. And, you know, what you put on the outside will often like make its way inside. That's why I think natural fiber underwear is also a really great idea. It's like becoming very, very popular to have like these no-show undies, and they're all made of synthetic materials, and it just doesn't let the vag breathe, you know? So that's another thing. And then like thongs as well. Like, you know, you're putting a piece of like wet fabric up there. Like, of course it's going to lead to bacterial overgrowth. It's hot, it's wet, like the, you know, it's just not going to end well. So those are some things to like bring up. Like I like to bring up is just like, it doesn't make sense, but we do it anyways because everyone else does it. And it's probably not going to end well for us. Do you think the GI map is a good indicator of Candida overgrowth? I believed I had Candida overgrowth for years, but GI map showed nothing. Well, remember, there are plenty of other yeasts in the body besides Candida, and that's why I like to bring up fungus, and I've been bringing up fungus more and more lately because I've been studying it a lot, first of all, because I'm working on a gut program, but there's a lot of different funguses. We have a very interesting fungal microbiome, and Candida is just one of many. And that's why like I find that gut tests are just very lacking when it comes to fungus. And even the organic acids test. I mean, you can see the byproducts of fungus, but you don't necessarily know which funguses you're struggling with. I mean, you can kind of narrow it down and say this fungus creates this metabolic byproduct, so therefore I probably have this fungus. It's actually very difficult to test for fungus. So I don't really think the GI map is a great indicator of Candida overgrowth unless you have overgrowth in your colon where the waste is coming from. That's the thing about stool tests, is they're coming from your colon, and they're coming from, you know, a part of your colon. So what if the fungal overgrowth is at the whole other side of the colon? Or what if it's in the small intestine? You're not getting any samples from those places. So that, like, again, I just like to bring, like, the awareness that stool tests are not perfect. They can be helpful, but if you believe you struggle with fungus, you might struggle with fungus. It's just probably not Candida. Or it might be, it's just in a different place. What do you use for deodorant? I recently tried magnesium oil, but it burned a little. Oh, I don't blame you. That stuff burns. Okay, so the bougie deodorant that I like, which I don't get all the time, because it's bougie. It is, but it's also like amazing, is Primally Pure, and she uses a base of tallow, and I like that she uses like she does use a little bit of baking soda, but it's mostly like tapioca starch, which I don't do well with the high baking soda ones. Sometimes I will use native. It's not perfect, but I love the coconut vanilla smell. And then Schmidt's works okay. I usually will go on the EWG and kind of find one that has a low rating, but I personally like to let my armpits just do their thing. And sometimes they will stink a little bit, and I'll do like a bentonite clay mask to kind of draw that stuff out. But yeah, I love Primally Pure. Like if I was going to say like one that I love, it's that. Stink Stop works really well as well. Stink Stop. And then I know Agent Nature is really popular. I personally have never used it, but I've seen a lot of people that use it, and I'm kind of like, oh, I just like saying Agent Nature, you know, like I just want to say it 1,000 times. How to deal with parents who criticize my food choices. I just don't understand why people like criticize other people's food choices, especially when they're trying to do the best for their body. But I mean, I just set boundaries with people. Like I just straight up say, like, if you like I appreciate the concern, but like I would appreciate if you don't like say anything about my food. You know, like just say it straight up. I know it's kind of awkward, and like our culture, we're not really good at setting boundaries with people. You don't have to say it in a rude way, but just like straight up, just be like, you know, I'm thankful that you care about me and you care about my health enough to mention my food choices, but I would appreciate in the future if you just keep those to yourself. You know what I mean? Like you can say it in a respectful way. Have you ever seen someone with the 4 lows pattern on HTMA? I just got my test back with that pattern, and I'm curious what you recommend. I'm definitely feeling very burnout depleted. Yeah, see it all the time. I've seen it on myself before. It's a very depleted state, and it's just one of those things where we really have to remind ourselves, like, our body needs energy, and our body needs balance. And those are the two most important things. Like, it doesn't need anything in excess. It needs everything in balance. So I usually just focus on the first 4 level minerals the most. I do think that focusing on sodium and potassium first is sometimes very helpful. Doing things like the adrenal cocktail, lots of potassium-rich foods, tons of sea salt on the food. Most of the time, people with 4 lows are craving salt like crazy, so it's not that hard. I think it's particularly important with someone who has a 4 lows pattern to make sure they are eating at 3 hours on the dot, setting your timer for 2.5 hours to remind yourself that you need to eat by the 3-hour mark. Very particularly important. And eating within 30 minutes of waking and 30 minutes before going to bed, like, very important. So it's more about I personally take a food approach, and then I will, of course, focus on the minerals. But if you're doing all the minerals and you're not focusing on the food, it can sometimes just result in just people feeling worse or not getting any improvement. What toothpaste do you use, or what's your oral care routine? Yeah, so I have been liking Risewell toothpaste, but I also like Dr. Bronner's, and there's also this toothpaste in a jar that I've been using, and I can't remember the name. I usually just look for something that is pretty clean and doesn't have a lot of additives, because I really don't want to scrape my enamel off of my teeth. I think a lot of people overbrush their teeth. So I very much rely upon coconut oil pulling. I do that in the morning right when I wake up. I just put a spoonful of coconut oil in my mouth, swish it through my mouth, push and pull it through my teeth, spit it out, scrape my tongue, and then we'll do a brush and a floss, and then I do that again in the evening. For people who have really bad oral microbiome health, whether it's because they're struggling with gut health issues or their gut is shifting, which does happen, I think it's really important to rinse with water after every meal, and then possibly even do water flossing, just to prevent cavities as much as possible as the microbiome shifts, because it can, when the microbiome is shifting, cavities can start to pop up, and you are a lot more sensitive to what you're eating. And so it's really important for the oral microbiome to just be good about doing that. And then if you can't rinse your mouth for whatever reason, having some xylitol gum in your purse to chew on to kind of clean off the teeth at least a little bit. If you use Bentonite clay masks, I love them and think they work greatly for oily acne skin. Do you wash it off down the sink? I heard it's really bad for clogging water pipes. I actually will wet a warm washcloth and then wipe it off. But I do end up washing it into, I usually do it while I'm in the shower. So I put the mask on and then hop in the shower. So yeah, but I have had a clogged sink now that I think about it when I've used it. I thought it was my hair, but now, I'm rethinking that for sure. But yeah, it does clog pipes, I'm sure. It's those chunks of clay, I'm no plumber, but I can only imagine. Hey, Jess, in a previous live, you mentioned how you weren't a fan of talk therapy. Could you explain why, and as well as alternatives to help process grow from trauma? Thank you. I should clarify that I think what works for people is important. So whatever works for people. But I do think that there is, and I'm spacing on who the doctor is, but he talked about, I read his book. He talked about how talk therapy, so we have the way that our brain works and our neurons work is we create certain pathways. And when we experience trauma, we try to circumvent that trauma. So we create a different pathway that's a coping mechanisms, whether it's whatever it is, let's just use whining as an example. And so, we start whining to circumvent that trauma. And so then when we go to talk therapy and we just whine and whine, we're really emphasizing that pathway now. We're really starting to to carve it into stone. And he talks about how you don't want to carve these negative patterns that we've created in our brain into stone. We're trying to rewire our brain. And so that's where I think neurofeedback or EDMR or something like that is probably more effective, because you're finding exactly where that trauma is. You're getting to the root of it, and then you don't just hash it out and talk it out until it's cemented in stone. Sometimes I think talking about our problems over and over again almost like puts us in this really negative headspace. And of course, sometimes it can make us feel better to just get things out and to work them out. But I think that there does come a point where if you're just talking and not creating action. So of course that comes down to the therapist as well. But I do think that neurofeedback is probably a very helpful thing to use in therapy. But again, like I think everyone's a little different, and they should use what mental health support works for them. Because it is important to process and grow from trauma. Like trauma is one of the main things that often is holding us back from healing. And that's that total mental, emotional component of health. And a lot of us just have things that we don't even realize were traumatic for us that, as we work them out and as we are talking them out with somebody else, we do come across these traumas and we're like, oh, now I know. But that's where I think neurofeedback could come in handy, because if you're struggling with trauma and you're not exactly sure what was the traumatic part, because I think sometimes we know we experienced trauma, but we don't know why we're hanging on to it. And that's where I think like actually having some physical data while we're working it out is helpful. And that's where like I think like therapy that includes neurofeedback is probably more effective. But that's just my personal opinion. I'm able to get local raw milk, but it's not organic or grass-fed. Am I better off buying pasteurized with that label? Yeah, I would say that I personally don't trust raw milk if they're not like really taking care of the cows. Like I don't want to drink raw milk from a sick cow, if that makes sense. Tips for higher calorie meals if I can't eat dairy, eggs, or high starch food. Thoughts on not combining fruit with other foods for better digestion. I think that sounds really stressful. Fruit does digest faster, so I would probably sometimes I'll just eat it. It'll be on my plate with a meal, but I'll actually eat the fruit first and then consume the rest of the meal after the fruit. But yeah, I would just tips on higher calorie meals. You're just going to have to get creative on eating plenty of meats, broths, fruits, eating fruits in different ways, coconut products, if you can handle them, tolerate them, root vegetables, squashes. Your diet's probably going to be pretty neutral. Like it's not going to be super exciting, but the goal would be to get away from that as soon as you can. Like, if the digestive system is impaired, the goal is to fix it while we're eating restrictive, so we don't have to be restricted forever. Okay, I lost my place. Yay! You guys know it at least happens every once alive, Let's see. I love like being able to scroll through all your questions because you guys have great ones that start to come in. Okay. I'm 5'4", 250 pounds, have been for about 8 years. I started growing facial hair somewhere in there. Is laser hair removal a good idea? I'm sad and sick of dealing with the hair growth and the scarring. Yeah, I'm sure. I think it's totally a personal choice when it comes to hair removal. Understanding that the hair growth is coming from something is important, but at the same time, while we're dealing with it, doing whatever we need to do about the hair growth is sometimes good for our mental health. I personally have no experience with laser hair removal, so I can't give like a lot of my opinion on it, but I know a lot of women have used it. Is there a specified way to take the vitamin E and K without food, morning together, separate, or does it not matter at all? Personally, I don't take supplements away from food unless there's a very specific reason I am. I think that they digest better when consumed with food and nutrients. Hey, Jess, do you think raw liver contains more nutrients than cooked or desiccated? I would say no on the cooked. I would say yes on the desiccated, just because like desiccated liver is obviously not going to be the same as whole fresh liver. But I don't think raw is superior to cooked. And I don't think you guys should be eating it raw just because I do. I know like I share sometimes what I do, but I don't by any means think that you should do it just because I'm doing it that way. Sometimes I just do things because it's easy or because I'm lazy and I still want to get the nutrients from something. Or like liver just is kind of gross. Like I don't like it cooked. So sometimes it's just easier for me to swallow it with some orange juice. Worried about my cholesterol in this diet, but it's caused by stress, right? Cortisol. Yeah, and look at how cholesterol, like just do your research on how cholesterol is very protective. Cholesterol is converted into sex hormones by thyroid hormone, red light, and vitamin A. And so if we have elevated cholesterol, then we need to ask ourselves why it's not converting into sex hormones. Or vitamin D, is made from cholesterol. All hormones are made from cholesterol. So oftentimes we have like mineral issues that are underlying: copper deficiency, magnesium deficiency. We need a better thyroid function. And then, in reality, like I love Morley Robbins' description of this. He says, like, when cholesterol is high, you can think of it as like, let's say your house was on fire. Would you blame the firemen for showing up to the fire? Like, go home, like, get out of here. We don't need you here. That's how we're treating cholesterol. Like, cholesterol is there to do a job, and we're blaming it. We're demonizing it. And it's like, no, there's other problems happening, and we're blaming cholesterol for the other problems. Following a food-first approach with liver, oysters, gelatin, bone broth, raw dairy, carrots, and fruit, how much of an importance do supplements play? Hey, I think that the answer to that question lies in how your body does on that, because a lot of people don't do what you're doing, and a lot of people don't find or don't realize how much better a food-first approach works. So I personally know that no amount of supplements can take the place of food in a good diet with the proper food frequency. But sometimes, after 2 or 3 months, we need to reevaluate and say, okay, what supplements do we need? But I truly think that people should give it 3 months of consistency before they do any supplements or like a bunch of supplements. Some people will just do like 10 supplements and they have no idea what they need really. When do you personally use wild oregano? So in the past, I've used it for gut issues, and I use like 5 drops in the morning, 5 drops at night, just to like kill bacteria or fungus. But now I use it probably like 3 times a week, maybe 1 or 2 drops under the tongue. Just, I don't want to get sick like right now. So I just kind of do it to kind of like keep everything chugging along. That's kind of my mindset. But as of now, I don't use it a lot. I use it a little bit when I need it. If I do feel like I'm coming down with something, I will gargle with it with warm water and then swallow it. And usually I'll use like 5 to 10 drops there. What would you say about a 16-year-old female who had her first period 1 year ago and hasn't had one since and has never been on birth control? Is she stressed? I mean, it's really sad because our society just really, children who are developing, like they get the short end of the stick. Like we have to remember that 15, 16-year-olds are actually like still very much children, and their bodies are rapidly developing and growing. And then, so they have like a high need for nutrients. And then on top of it, oftentimes there's like school homework, oftentimes like social pressure right now, like it's so stressful, and stress like is totally gonna mess with a woman's cycle regardless of her age. So I think that that's like a big factor even with teenagers, because ovulation is not occurring if we're not having our period. And so what is the worst thing for ovulation? Stress. So I would say the same thing that applies to, a woman who's 25 is going to apply to a woman who's 15 or 16. In TCM, ovarian cysts are usually a result of parasites. Do you think there's a truth to that? How would you address parasites? I've definitely heard of that. Like I've gone down the parasite rabbit hole. If you've never been on the Cure Zone website, I mean, honestly, don't do it. But if you've ever been on that, like, you know what I'm talking about. But I personally think like a good like parasite tincture usually takes care of it. Some type of like anti-parasitic herbs like cloves, black. There's like one called, I think it's called black wormwood, if I'm or it's, yeah, I think it's young wormwood, black cloves, or something like that. So there's like some herbal tinctures. I really like one called Scram by Health Force. I think that one works really well. But yeah, I think like parasite cleansing can be sometimes fun. I mean, I find it fun, but it's not gonna, it can sometimes make people feel a lot better if they have parasites. But if they don't, or they don't get rid of any parasites, then sometimes there's some other gut stuff that needs to be implemented before doing parasite cleanses. But yeah, I think like there is a time and a place for parasite protocol for sure. Can eating quickly suppress our metabolism? For sure. We need to chew our food and relax. Like if our nervous system is in a fight or flight state, like we're gonna not digest our food properly. Would you take systemic enzymes if you had pitted acne scars, or would you have a more topical approach using microneedling? Love picking your brain. I might try them, honestly. Like if I had any type of scarring or like inflammation or fibrosis or anything like that, I would probably try systemic enzymes just because I think they're like great to have in a toolkit when you're dealing with something. I would also probably use like very nutrient-rich things that contain like vitamin A, vitamin E, possibly raw honey. So anything that's a humectant. So humectants they draw water to themselves. They're almost osmotic, meaning that they're like drawing water into the cell. So raw honey is a humectant. Anything with sugar is a humectant. And so that's why like raw honey is a particularly healing thing that has been used for a really long time. So I would personally probably do like red light, raw honey, probably like tallow or anything rich in like vitamin A, vitamin E, maybe cocoa butter, trying some different like fats to see what worked the best for me. And then, yeah, possibly doing some internal stuff as well. And then just giving it time, What might cause bloating immediately after eating? Signify, after I eat starches, my belly blows up like I'm 7 months pregnant. Also, I'll get swollen all over and it goes down after a few days. If it's very quickly after eating, oftentimes it's something that's high up in the digestive tract. Because remember, like what we immediately eat takes a while to get into the small intestine, at least like an hour or so, sometimes a little less. But if we're immediately bloated, either our digestive system is sluggish, we're not breaking down what's in our stomach, or a lot of people have fungal and bacterial overgrowth even in their stomach or high up in the small intestines. Not saying that that's exactly what it is. Some people are just super stressed out or like eating too fast, not chewing their food well, and that can play a factor as well. But a lot of times if people are very bloated, I call it high bloat. It's like where you're bloated right underneath your breast rather than lower. That's usually like indicative of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, fungal overgrowth, parasitic overgrowth, those types of things. Can you take too much progesterone? I take it before bed, but it makes me feel like I'm drunk. My body gets super heavy feeling and I can hardly function. Yeah, progesterone can definitely knock people out, and taking too much definitely, makes me feel super groggy. I read about aspirin about helping fertility, can be taken during pregnancy too. How much would you take? I have heard of people taking it during like pregnancy, or their doctors recommending it during like IVF treatment. Not saying that's right for you, so make sure you do research. It's just something that I have heard of people doing. It has a lot of different benefits, from being an anti-inflammatory to an aromatase inhibitor to supporting the liver, and possible even like undiscovered benefits. I know Dr. Ray Peat talks about it immensely. He's a huge fan of aspirin and thinks it's almost like a miracle drug. But I personally, like, I've had some benefits from it for sure. But would I take it during pregnancy? I would probably be very conservative about how I took it. Let's just put it that way. Like, I wouldn't go crazy with it. But yeah, I personally heard some great things, but then I'm sure there are people out there that would say like never take it during pregnancy either. So I think it's one of those things where I think, everyone's going to have a different opinion. In your last live, you said you think a lot of people actually have fungal issues. What's the best way to address fungal? I just started Oregano. To me, the best way to address fungal is to first support the adrenals. So a lot of times people's adrenals are shot. And estrogen dominance can play a huge role. So if someone's estrogen dominant, a lot of times they just need to keep doing what they're doing, get their estrogen under control. But sometimes in the meantime, taking some things that are antifungal can be helpful. I think rotating antifungals is much more effective than just taking one, because fungus is very, very smart and it will get used to one and then it will stop working altogether. Like you might find that if something's working, your bloating's going down, you're feeling like you're digesting things better, your mental clarity is better, you feel like your blood sugar is more under control, your moods are more stable, and then all of a sudden you're going to be like, this isn't working anymore. So that's why I like rotating certain things. There's a lot of different antifungals out there. I like Pau d'Arco. I think it's a great herb. It's not for everybody, but it can be very effective. Caprylic acid is also pretty good. Monolaurin is pretty good. Undecylinic acid like SF722 by Thorne is really good. Garlic, really good. So there's a lot of different like antifungal blends out there. FC Cidal by Dysbiocide is a nice like herbal blend. So yeah, I like all those types of antifungals. But yeah, the best way to address it is usually to do like 3 weeks on and then take a break and then try 3 weeks again. I know Dr. Ray Peat talks about flowers of sulfur being effective, which is just like literally like powdered sulfur or brimstone. I've done it. Like he says like a pinch works really well. So I've tried it. I don't know. Like I don't really see a big difference from it. I mean, it could have been killing fungus, but I'm too scared to take it every day. So I think that there are some other ways that you can get rid of fungus as well. And then of course we want to do something that's going to sweep the fungus out, like making sure we're getting plenty of raw carrot salad and those types of things to make sure like we're pooping and getting rid of all that junk. Thoughts on matcha? Is it overrated? Anti-nutrients? It is overrated. Like it's any green tea is full of fluoride. However, just because it's naturally rich in fluoride, but of course, matcha has some beneficial effects as well. Like green tea is beneficial. I do think like over time it can be anti-thyroid though. If people are taking it and they're finding that they're consistently cold or consistently have hypothyroid issues, like it's probably not working well for them. Do you know what might be some causes of dark sunken circles under the eyes? I've had them since I was a teenager and they don't go away with enough sleep. I'm pretty sure there's a nutritional cause. Yeah, a lot of times it's liver related. If it's not like sleep related or stress related, it can be liver related, copper related, B vitamin related. And then it can sometimes have to do with like really bad food allergies as well. Like if people are really, really sensitive to certain foods and have really bad gut issues, then that can be an indicator of that as well. You'll sometimes see them on children that have really bad like whatever food allergies, like let's say gluten issues. They'll have really dark circles under their eyes. Tips for osteoporosis in your 20s. I would be really concerned with like what the things having the things that I need to make healthy bones. So having enough progesterone, having estrogen, like having a healthy cycle, making sure I'm getting plenty of vitamin K2 and vitamin K2 rich foods, making sure I'm getting plenty of calcium in my diet, which interestingly enough, nature provides both K2 and calcium in dairy products. I would be making sure I'm getting plenty of sunlight for vitamin D. All those are factors for bone health. Are you taking any new FN clients soon? Fully Nourished is open always, but I maybe you mean like any new students into clients. We will announce when that's happening. You haven't missed it yet. When I was a little kid, I thought horseradish was made from real horses. That's pretty funny. Okay. My friend, her daughter is completely bald on top of her head. Any idea what she needs to do to heal that and grow hair? It's very patchy, long hair on bottom and bald on top. I don't know. I don't know anything about her, but I would be looking for, of course, root causes of what's going on. Any major difference in cane sugar versus white sugar? White sugar is cane sugar. It's just unrefined cane sugar still has some minerals, whereas refined, like pure white cane sugar, is just pure sugar that's been extracted. There's no minerals. It's just pure sucrose, which is 50% glucose and 50% fructose. Is maca effective for hormone balance? It's pretty estrogenic, so I would be careful with it, but some people really like how it makes them feel. It is goitrogenic, so raw maca powder, it's not meant to be eaten raw. It should be gelatinized or boiled. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of maca. I think there are many more effective things to support hormones. And remember, like, hormone balance comes from our daily practices. What we eat and how we live is way different. It's going to have a way different impact than one specific supplement or nutrient. So we have to get the foundations laid, which is why I made Fully Nourished. Like, all the things in Fully Nourished should be addressed before someone starts jumping into like stacks and stacks of random supplements. It just doesn't work. Like, it's just it's a waste of time and money. Hi, I think you mentioned this before. I may have missed it. Who do you recommend for men to work with? I like Travis Harris, and if you DM me on Instagram, we can send you that as well, that name if you forget. But Travis Harris is an NTP who I really like. Started Poof and Protect last month. Thoughts on why my acne on forehead would clear when starting it, but now it's back. Also had bad gas when I started it, MCT oil, and now it's almost gone. Very confused. So vitamin E, like all fat soluble vitamins, play a role in gut health. So they can have like a very antibacterial effect, as can a lot of stuff. So yeah, it can definitely shift the microbiome for sure. I find that it like makes a huge difference in my gut health, like seriously. When I miss it, I have way different gut health. Because remember, polyunsaturated fats really mess with enzyme production, which keeps bacteria in check and helps you digest your food, all that good stuff. Sometimes when we have an initial detox, we'll get rid of some stuff and then things will start moving some more and then acne will come back. But also, like, I'd pay attention to if the acne is popping up at certain times of the cycle, if acne pops up when you're constipated or if you're constipated. A lot of people are constipated and don't realize that their acne is from being constipated. Being constipated, like, has more to do with how we're pooping than how much we're pooping. Because you can poop 3 times a day but have like really weird poops where you're still leaving a lot of nasty residue in your colon. You know what I mean? Like, you need to have full satisfying poops that get rid of all the waste, like everything. And sometimes when we're shifting our health, that's not happening. And so our body's having to get rid of things through the skin as well. Sorry, that was kind of a tangent. Are you familiar with the Weston A. Price's Foundation list of sacred foods? It's mostly PUFA foods, fish heads and liver oil and fish eggs. I know you don't agree with them on everything, but is it just cause of other nutrients in them, or are they just off base? I would just want to know, like, where the sacred foods are coming from. I know there are specific, like, if you do some research on like specific leaders and things like that. Like, for example, if you look at like the certain Native American leaders, like, they actually, their whole tribe would eat fish, but they wouldn't. The chief would not. Or if you look at, like, let's just use like bees, for example, you know, all the worker bees eat bee bread, which is a mixture of bee pollen and honey. Bee pollen has a little bit more PUFA in it, but the queen who lives the longest and is the biggest, gorges herself on royal jelly, which is saturated fat and full of B vitamins. I just find that that's very fascinating. So just because something is traditional, it might have been out of necessity over it actually being a nutritious food. And if you look at the most prized people of traditional cultures, that's who you want to mimic. Because a lot of times these traditional cultures knew what was up, but they didn't have enough to go around. And so who was the one that was going to eat the best diet? Who was going to be feasting on the stuff that helped them to live the longest? It would have been the kings and the chiefs and the people that they prized. So that's just a long meal, having a long way of saying that. I'm not really sure like where they're getting the sacred foods from, but a lot of times foods that are held as sacred have other nutrients in them besides just the omegas. A lot of times people will be like, oh, it's the omega-3s or this, but like, for example, fish eggs. I mean, look at that vibrant color. You can't tell me that those aren't full of nutrients other than just the fats. There's so much more in those foods. Like they're going to grow into a whole fish, and you can eat 100 of them in one sitting or whatever. So I do think that those foods like should definitely be looked at in context. And I'm not a big believer in like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like I don't necessarily think that just because something has a PUFA in it, like it's bad. We still eat eggs. Eggs have PUFAs. Beef has PUFA. Milk even has some PUFA in it, but it's mostly that omega-3 polyunsaturated fat. So to live a completely PUFA-free life is not possible. It's just concentrated sources of PUFA that don't provide any other nutrients that are valuable to the metabolism. I hope that makes sense. What are your thoughts on Saccharomyces boulardii? I've talked about before how some people can have, Saccharomyces boulardii is part of our fungal microbiome. We have a bunch of different funguses in different parts of our body. And Saccharomyces boulardii is one that tends to overgrow, like for a lot of people. And then they go and take Saccharomyces boulardii more, and they cause like they're reacting to the Saccharomyces boulardii. So I think it can be really beneficial for some people and really bad for others. And that's just with any type of like probiotic or yeast or anything like that. Should you avoid sugar with a UTI? I've learned how central sugar is to the FN diet, but everyone says sugar is horrible for them. When it comes to urinary tract infections, people are getting them mostly because of bacteria. Remember, like bacteria is coming from the digestive tract, right? And when the body's too overloaded with pathogens, so we have a vein, like I'm going to rewind for a second. We have a vein that goes from the gut to the liver. It's called the hepatic vein or the portal vein. And, the nutrients are flowing directly from the digestive tract into the liver, and then the liver gets to determine like where those nutrients go. It's that kind of like storage tank for nutrients. But the liver is also going to filter out a lot of bacteria and toxins from the bacteria that are possibly leaking. So when you have leaky gut, you're leaking pathogens into that hepatic vein and they're going to the liver. Where do you think those bacteria are gonna go? The liver has to do something with them. It doesn't just let them take up residence in the liver. It tries to put them back into the digestive tract via the bile. So the gallbladder, and then the bile will flow into the small intestine. Well, the kidneys are a part of this system too. Bacteria can spill over into the urinary tract and cause a whole host of problems. And so when we have a really damaged or imbalanced microbiome, this is where urinary tract infections can become very chronic. It has everything to do with what's going on in the gut and very little with what's you eating sugar. But sometimes sugar can make these bacterial issues feel worse. Cutting the sugar might help the UTI a little bit, but that doesn't mean it's fixing the problem, especially if these UTIs are becoming chronic. But I really like the product that Just Thrive came out with called UT123. I mean, I haven't had a UTI enough to try it, but the ingredients in it are awesome, and I've just been taking it to see like how I feel with it, and it works. It works really well just for urinary tract health. I've been getting goosebumps the last few months whenever I eat or drink anything. It's gotten better some of the last few weeks as I've been trying to get enough food in. Any thoughts? So weird. That is so weird. And I've always wondered if goosebumps have like something to do with our vagus nerve. We have this nerve that runs down our spine and like connects to all of our digestive organs. And when we're like really relaxed, it's stimulated, and it helps stimulate all of our digestive function. But the vagus nerve, interestingly enough, like, I don't know if you guys have heard of ASMR, but I think that ASMR has a lot to do with the vagus nerve as well, and why people are like so addicted to ASMR. But that was just like a tangent saying, like, I'm not sure. I've never heard of that, but it could be maybe a good sign that, the vagus nerve is working well. But I don't even know why goosebumps happen. Now I'm going to have to like go down that rabbit hole. Why is raw milk best? I think your recommended Greek yogurt is high quality regular yogurt just as good. I have never said that raw milk is best. People love to like take things that I say and then they kind of like are this game of telephone, and people are like, just drinks raw milk, so raw milk is therefore the best. But by no means I'm like a guru, like I just do the best I can with what I have available to me. Raw milk, at least for me, is the best option I have. It is organic, it's grass-fed, and it's unadulterated, meaning it hasn't been pasteurized or homogenized, like no one has messed with it. And so that's the type of milk that I buy. However, I do use a lot of pasteurized milk products just because I only have access to raw milk and cream. I don't have access to raw yogurt. I don't have access to raw cottage cheese. I don't have access to many raw cheeses. I have a few, but not a lot. So I do a mixture of raw dairy products and pasteurized dairy products. But by no means is raw milk best. It's just some people digest it better because it still has the enzymes in it. Whereas when it's pasteurized or brought up to that high temperature, it no longer has enzymes. And so it can be harder to digest for some people. I'm pregnant, can't do seafood at all. I would eat maybe a bit of shrimp, but I can't stomach it currently. Worried about iodine as my thyroid might need it. Would sea kelp be okay, or what would you do? I would just probably throw like a dulse, like a piece of dulse, or like you said, kelp or something, just into my broth. Some type of like seaweed thing into like a broth to just let it. Sometimes it's called like kombu, I think. But yeah, I would just probably try to get something from the sea. They also make dulse flakes. They're like seafood flakes that you can put on your food. What causes migraines and mood changes week before period? Been eating pro-metabolic and raw carrot salad a few months. Usually estrogen. So estrogen is, if we are not detoxifying well, or we're not making enough progesterone, and our luteal phase is really rough, we really need to continue to support estrogen and also make sure we're ovulating and making enough progesterone. What fruit do you think you can kick the farthest? What? Why are there so random people on the lives? Hi, Jess. What are your thoughts on causes of recurrent BV infections? I think the vaginal microbiome is messed up, and I think that it needs to be shifted. Oftentimes, this has to do with what's going on in the gut. Many people who have BV issues also have gut issues, but lactic acid producing bacteria kind of reigns in the vagina, or it should. And when people have dysbiosis in the vaginal microbiome, a lot of times they get recurring BV. So restoring that lactic acid or lactobacillus is usually the best. Was wondering if, and the way that I personally have done that in the past is by soaking a tampon in yogurt or kefir and inserting it and leaving it in while I sleep. Was wondering a bioavailable alternative for vitamin A. I can't eat beef liver because I get anaphylactic shock from beef. Do you get anaphylactic shock from like all ruminant animals like lamb or bison? Those would be the things that I would look into, or even like chicken liver. Best foods, supplements to make fattier breast milk for baby. Just eating more in general and lots of like saturated fats. So like dairy specifically, making sure you're getting enough carbs and proteins as well. And then some people will like add brewer's yeast. I think that it's a slightly estrogenic, but it's so rich in B vitamins. That's why it like helps so much with breast milk, and why like most lactation cookies have brewer's yeast in them. It's because of the nutrients. But yeah, if breast milk, you want to make breast milk fatty, like eat pro-metabolic, like eat plenty of carbs, plenty of protein, plenty of fats. Like when I'm breastfeeding, I will definitely be trying to Noelle Covery, if you don't follow her, she's like goals. She hits like 4,000 calories a day. She's like always eating for her breast milk and her baby. But she has some great ideas. She does like hot chocolate during the day, and she drinks tons of milk before bed. Just like basic foods. Just making sure you're getting enough is important. I've tried everything for hair shedding. I've been on FN for 4 months and feeling so discouraged. Wonder if you have primary focuses for your clients who deal with hair loss. Yeah, I mean, I go down the line of what's driving hair loss. So oftentimes it's hypothyroidism. Are they hypothyroid? If that's a yes, then where's their stress hormones at? A lot of times stress hormones are still really high. If those are not the problem and the gut is the problem, then oftentimes it's the gut. So if there's digestive issues and gut issues, then a lot of times, that can affect how we're absorbing and assimilating nutrients. It can also increase endotoxin, which is those bacterial toxins in the bloodstream, which can cause inflammation. And the hair follicles are really, really sensitive to inflammation as well as endotoxin. So I like to pay attention to if hair loss is cyclical. That's the first sign. If it gets worse during specific times in the cycle, it's usually getting worse around the times when our estrogen is the highest. If that's the case, then we often can know like there is a hormonal component. If it's just always falling out at the same rate, then a lot of times there's more inflammation and stress involved. But if people start to pay attention to patterns, a lot of times people are kind of like traumatized by their hair shedding, so they try to ignore it as much as possible. But I think it's better to pay attention to when it's at its worst, because that's when you can really start to make a connection as to what's driving it the most. I'm wanting, and sometimes doing some things that are topical can help while we're getting to the bottom of why it's shedding. But the first things I kind of go down, I'll just list what I go down the line on. Stress is first. If stress is not taken care of, that's the reason. And then that's going to suppress thyroid function. There are other things that, are important for thyroid function. So how's the temperature? Remember that blood flow needs to make it all the way to the scalp. And if we don't have good temps or pulses, then blood flow is not making it to the scalp very well. So we need to improve circulation. And then, like I said, I go down the line of estrogen, progesterone, and then gut health. I'm wanting to start my kiddos on some vitamin E, personally take Mito, but wondering if that's too much for them. They're 12 and 10. Probably a little too much. Like I would just maybe open up a capsule and do a little bit. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm not a children nutritionist. So I'm always hesitant to say anything because that's not my forte, but they're not so young. But I would probably maybe cut it in half or something. I wouldn't do a full adult dose. Hi, I think you mentioned this before. I may have missed it. Who do you recommend for men to work with? I suspect he has insulin resistance. Travis Harris, NTP, or Isaac Pullman is also really good. For someone dealing with burnout, what are some steps you would suggest to start to heal? First things first is vitamin N. So please say no to everything that is not an absolute necessity. Get really, really good at saying not at this time. No, thank you. Not right now. Just get really good at it. Also, if you have children or you're married, communicate with your partner and tell them I need help during this time. Sometimes, spouses can be, it's not that they're being intentionally negligent. I just think that sometimes they're just, if they get used to certain patterns and when you need something to change, it's often you have to bring it up. You have to communicate it. And it's sometimes hard because you're not saying there's anything wrong with them. You're just saying hey, I need things to be a little different around here. I need a little bit more me time to recover. So I think those are first thing, create the environment you need to heal. first. That's the first steps. Then once you have the environment you need to heal, you're not as busy, you're not doing 1,000 things in a day, you're not trying to please everyone in your life, like you've got some help. Then you go ahead and start implementing the raw materials you need to heal. Eating every 3 hours on the dot. And when I say on the dot, I mean on the dot. Being very consistent with that, eating within 30 minutes of waking, 30 minutes before going to bed, and then being really good about your main 4 minerals: calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. And resting, letting yourself sleep. If you can have a few days a week where you sleep in. I know some of you are mothers and that's not possible, so maybe ask for 1 or 2 days where your husband gets the children and you get to sleep in. So thinking about some meet in the middle ways that you can have a little bit more time to rest and recover, and doing that for 6 to 8 to sometimes 12 weeks makes all the difference. And if you have the time and the resources to even do like a small vacation or a small just like getaway with just you, even if it's just a night, sometimes it can be helpful to get out of the stress, get out of your routine, just get away and just relax. That can make a huge difference. I mean, obviously vacations are probably the most effective way to get out of burnout very quickly, but there's not a lot of people going on vacations right now. I don't even know if it's possible. I haven't looked into it. 3 weeks pregnant, hemoglobin and ferritin low, few months before pregnancy after a long fast. Don't do that anymore. I still have them lows despite eating liver and pro-metabolic eating. I was told Shilajit helps. What would you do? Personally, what would I do? I would keep focusing on beef liver, keep focusing on nutrient-dense foods, keep focusing on like whole foods, vitamin C, like copper-rich foods. And personally, like I probably wouldn't stress about it. Like I've just done so much research and so like read so many articles and studies that I personally am unconcerned with iron and am more concerned with like magnesium and copper. You know what I mean? Magnesium is another one that I didn't bring up. Is magnesium is so incredibly important, and often people who have weird iron levels are both copper and magnesium deficient. But yes, go through Morley Robbins' articles. He just wrote a really good one. It's number 81 on, specifically talking about pregnancy months 6 through 9 and why like anemia does not exist then. Are tanning beds as horrible for you as they made out to be? Then help my acne immensely. I personally don't think they are. Now, this is like, of course, not medical advice. I think it really depends on like how much PUFAs you have in your tissues. If you're saturated with polyunsaturated fat, then like, of course, like it's probably not a great idea to like bake. It's like baking a taco in canola oil. But I personally use tanning beds occasionally during the winter time. I haven't this winter because our tanning salons are still closed in California, but I really like using them for just getting some vitamin D. And I use them like the lowest level bed they have available, and obviously the least amount of time. Like I'm not in there to look like I'm roasted. I just am in there for the health benefits. But yes, I use them. There are better ways to obviously get UV, but some people need them, especially if they live in like a very, very cold, dark place. And I've just heard so many people who have, and they can't like afford a UVB lamp. Like there are UV lights out there that you can invest in, but they're very expensive. And so I've heard a lot of people using tanning beds for those things. But that's of course very argued amongst people. So it's not something that I technically like recommend. I just think that there are tools available to us if we use them properly. Also, shedding so much hair, still very worried as my 4-year-old girl has more hair than me now. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we have to really get to the bottom of our stress and remember that as much as we love our hair only grows in an environment of excess. Our body doesn't grow hair when it's trying to survive. And some people it does, like of course genetics do play a role, but oftentimes hair is the first thing to go. Just bought your course today to walk through with my bestie. Curious, does your course address parasites and eliminating them? No, it's not a gut course. Like, we do have a gut section in there, but it's specifically focused on metabolism. I'm coming out with a gut course in the next couple of months. Hey Jess, recently started noticing little white particles in urine, no pain or other signs of infection. Doctor said it could be my body ovulating, but I've never had this before. Any tips or advice on this? I've never heard of that before. White particles in urine, I've never heard of that. That's interesting. I honestly have never heard of that. It could, sometimes it's, I'm wondering if it could be like oxalate crystals. I don't know, like what you've been dealing with, like if you just have basic hormonal issues or if there's gut issues involved, but, sometimes people have like excess oxalate crystals their body's producing or getting rid of, calcium crystal or calcium as well. But I've never heard of that specifically, seeing them. Can you take Oregano P73 and Bifidus maximus at the same time for fungus bacteria? Yes, I think it's actually the most effective way. You just don't want to take them close together because they'll kind of cancel each other out. But the mindset behind that is, you're working on instilling that kind of native bacteria back into the body, all the while kind of weeding or working on the bacteria and the fungus. Do you think Berkey is a good water filter? Are there better ones you recommend in that price range? Also, what shower filters do you like? I personally, I don't think Berkey is the best investment. I personally would invest in like a clearly filtered filter over a Berkey, just because I think that like there are some things that a Berkey filters out, but there's not, it doesn't filter everything. But I think it's very helpful to have like in emergencies. So honestly, like I think there are pros and cons to Berkey. I should just say like there are pros and then there are cons. I don't think it's the worst, but I don't think it's the best. And then for shower filters, I use a Aquasana shower filter, just like a charcoal filter. There are plenty out there. I don't really know which one's best. I know like some people have talked about the Omica Organics one being really good. I've never tried it, but I'm not like really a whiz when it comes to shower filters. I just picked one and I like was happy with it. How would you improve post-inflammatory pigmentation internally and topically, and how to care for this during pregnancy? Have been breaking out lately and not love it. Thank you, Jess. Post-inflammatory pigmentation. Are you I'm assuming that means like more like hyperpigmentation. And if it's a hyperpigmentation during pregnancy or like melasma, a lot of times that has a lot to do with estrogen and polyunsaturated fats. So dealing with the polyunsaturated fats is usually very helpful. I know a lot of women have been helped quite a bit with vitamin E. And oftentimes it actually like has to be fixed after pregnancy just because estrogen is so elevated during pregnancy, but not always. But yeah, I mean, that's how I would approach any type of like hyperpigmentation or pigmentation, just with a pro-metabolic diet, getting plenty of vitamin E, getting plenty of magnesium, all my minerals, those types of things. Is a red light a good source of vitamin D? No, they don't help you make vitamin D. However, they can help you utilize copper better and iron, which in theory could possibly help you make more hormone D in the future. But no, it doesn't actually like actively or directly help you make hormone D. Hi, Jessica. I'm hit with another gastritis flare today. I think food related, but do you have any insight on other possible causes, stress or imbalance? Feel like I took 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So yeah, whenever it comes to like stomach irritation, I'm always very curious about like, first of all, take a step back and say like, what's going on in life? Is there a lot of stress? Because if that's the case, then yes, that could be a factor. Another thing is I always take a glance at where someone is at in the cycle, because even if that doesn't seem like relevant information, a lot of times if you look at 3 flares, like for whatever, let's just use gastritis as an example. Oftentimes when you actually start to track patterns, you're like, every time I get a gastritis flare, I'm in my luteal phase. Let's just use that as an example. That doesn't mean that you're going to get a gastritis flare every luteal phase, but it is a good indicator that there could be a component of estrogen. Well, what does estrogen feed? It feeds yeast. It can help increase bacterial overgrowth. So, and then it also can increase stress, right? Stress and inflammation, which can lower stomach acid, so it can take a toll on the digestive system as a whole. If it's food related, I would be curious as to what foods are bringing it on. If it's dairy, for example, then, why is dairy bringing it on? A lot of times if you just feel worse with dairy consistently, it's fungal related. If it's gluten or starches, a lot of times there's still irritation and there needs to be some soothing happening and going on. But yeah, I could go on and on. Pretty much it's kind of like I try to track patterns. When we're struggling with a specific issue or a specific imbalance, it's very important to start paying attention to every tiny, minute detail that maybe you don't think is important, but is important. So for example, you're like, oh, I saw this person and every time I see this person, I get this flare. Because, don't overlook things being also mental, emotional as well. Like there have been things in my life that have completely taken a huge toll on my health, and I had no clue that they were bothering me at all. And until I got rid of them or said no to them, I finally saw the relief. So, don't underestimate the power of things that you don't think are important. But that's a long way of saying like stress imbalances, like of course it can be stress related, it can be hormone related, it can be food related. But if foods are consistently bringing on digestive symptoms, there's often dysbiosis involved. There's fungus, bacteria, overgrowth, intestinal permeability, liver toxicity that all needs to be addressed. Our gut should be pretty resilient to stress and pretty resilient to foods. And if it's not, then we have to just continue to work on it, which I know you have been for sure. I suspect fungal issues, gut problems, dandruff, and toenail fungus, past exposure to mold. What would you recommend in addition to pro-metabolic eating to eradicate it? Any specific supplements helpful? Personally, I would probably do some antifungals and some binders. I know that like IgG, Just Thrive makes one. So does Microbiome Labs. Is very helpful at binding to mycotoxins specifically. But yeah, binders are super helpful when it comes to like mold and fungus, and then like antifungals. But whenever doing that stuff, like making sure people are pooping is so important. Making sure we're pooping to get rid of the toxins during the die-off. Weird question. Does longer hair take more energy and nutrients to maintain? Would cutting one's hair off mean more fuel for the body? Not planning to, just a hypothetical. I don't think longer hair, because technically it's dead. As gross as that is, like I have just like these dead skin cells hanging from my head. I think that maintaining rapid hair growth and thick hair does take more energy, but I don't think that cutting hair is gonna like lower any stress on the body. But some people do report feeling different. There is a lot of talk about it being important for nervous system health. They bring up the fact that when the U.S. military hired or worked with Native Americans as trackers, the Native Americans got the traditional military haircut and they lost their ability to track. But when they let their hair grow out, they were able to be sensitive to their environment and start to track, like they were very much in tune with nature. So I thought that was interesting, and I think there is something there in regards to the nervous system more than anything else, which is why I think people get hair loss in specific areas of their body that correlate with the nervous system. We have, those nerves all along our scalp. But, when people cut their hair, they report feeling lighter and less stressed. And I just wonder if they're less sensitive to their environment, and so they feel better. Any ideas for something natural that can relieve itchiness and that would be safe for kids? Daughter has eczema and is really bothered by it at night, so it's disrupting her sleep. I like bee type products, ones that contain like propolis. Or like, just very soothing, like chamomile or arnica, like those types of things. I really like homeopathic remedies. Like those are all things that I really like that are just soothing. It's usually in like the first aid section of like most health food stores. Sorry if my question is dumb, but can I drink detox lemonade during pregnancy? Need to support liver and gallbladder. I've been feeling really crappy, weird, pukey lately. Yeah, I would avoid the herbs. Usually the chlorophyll in the cranberry is pretty mild. Chlorophyll can be a slight diuretic, so you really want to be good about minerals. There's not a lot of safety showing if chlorophyll is safe or not, but it's traditionally thought of as safe. So yeah, I think like occasional support for the gallbladder and the liver is probably good. I also really like Urban Moonshine's pregnancy safe bitters. Remember that most digestive bitters are not safe during pregnancy, but they have one blend that is. Is feeling more energized during the days you work out versus days you don't a sign that you're running off of adrenaline, or is it a normal response to a good workout? For some people it is. For some people it's not. There are other things in a workout though that can help you have more energy, like the endorphins, the blood flow. Those are all beneficial things that can help nutrients get to your cells faster. So I would never discount like it being only stress hormones. But if you can't function in a day without a workout, then a lot of times it is stress hormones. Thank you for your work. Any recommendations for dandruff? Like I say, usually dandruff is usually due to like fungus. Sometimes it's just due to like the environment being dry. But I find that like a diluted apple cider vinegar rinse works really well. A bentonite clay hair mask can work really well on the scalp. Morocco Method has a really good blend called Zen Detox. And then like natural hair care. But if that's not working, then usually there's something fungus related usually. Is the hair niacinamide and aspirin spray you just mentioned suitable while preggo? I mean, I don't see why not. I would personally use it. How do you balance the healing pounds with feeling out of shape? I've gained 20 to 25 pounds. I ovulate, but my knees hurt now when I hike, and I get out of breath so easily now. Working out and staying strong is still important. So if we have healing pounds and we're not feeling our best, at that point, like we should start getting a little bit more active. That doesn't mean we have to push ourselves until our knees hurt, but we should definitely be more active and getting ourselves into shape. You can still be in shape and have healing pounds to lose. I hope that makes sense. Like you can still be strong and have extra weight. So that, it's important to stay strong, build muscle, and over time, that's going to translate into a different body composition. I asked a couple of weeks ago, but I just wanted a bit more clarification. The detox lemonade is okay all cycle long, but you only want to add the milk thistle liver life during your luteal phase. Thanks. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you can use tinctures all you want. I just like to cycle herbs because I think that they are more effective that way. But yes, pretty much to clarify, yes, you can use the detox lemonade whenever you want to. It's not like a luteal phase specific drink, but it's a good idea to not just take the liver life constantly. Or if you take it for a couple of months, like take a break from it. What's the purpose of apple cider vinegar in the carrot salad? Is there a reason why we couldn't just use another vinegar like balsamic or another acid like lemon juice? Just curious about how to get creative with it. Yeah, you can absolutely use a different acid. Lemon juice works great. Sometimes it works better for some people. White vinegar, apple cider vinegar, balsamic vinegar, white wine vinegar, red wine vinegar. You can do whatever you want. Same thing with the oil. Use coconut oil, MCT oil, olive oil. I even like to do flavored salt sometimes, like garlic salt, regular salt. So you can definitely get creative for sure. Do you recommend consuming 93% carvacrol oregano oil? I used a few drops under the tongue when I had a sore throat and it seemed to help, but heard that it could be too potent to consume. Yeah, I only use wild oregano because most oregano oil is modified to produce a lot more. And it's not, there's some signs showing that it does pass the blood-brain barrier and it can be kind of dangerous. So I personally only use wild oregano. Raw carrot salad antidote. My friend was visiting me and I was choking down my raw carrot. I had an extra bag of carrots, so I gave them to my friend. My friend gave the dog the raw carrots and noticed that their dog's breath was amazing. They even skipped a day and their dog's breath was horrid that day. Haha. Yeah, I give Samson shredded carrots with every meal. It keeps his digestion really good and his breath and teeth are amazing. And if their teeth get dirty or their mouth gets dirty, giving them a bone to chew on, they love it, first of all, but it also helps clean their teeth. So hubby wants AirPods for work. He's not convinced that EMFs are harmful, but he's willing to change his mind. Do you know how they affect our bodies? Do you use any kind of headset for work? I will occasionally use a headset, but I don't like the idea of EMFs transmitting between my brain. Like the AirPods specifically are sending signals back and forth to one another. That can't be good. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Try to pull out maybe like a home experiment, and that explains just because you don't see something doesn't mean it's there. And look up all of the brain cancer rates of people starting to get cancers right around where or tumors right around where their headsets and things are. I just personally don't want to mess with it. I don't want to take a chance. Those things take a long time to develop. It doesn't just happen overnight. And we do have some control over our habits. So I don't personally use a headset while I work. I use just regular wired earbuds but I have an old iPhone for that very specific reason. If I have to get one that's new and that doesn't have any, I guess I think it only has one hole for the charger. I would just have to get different earbuds or different headphones. But yeah, I just use regular wired headphones. And then when I work out, I do use wireless, a wireless headset, but it doesn't transmit through the head. It has a bar that hangs behind my neck. And I only wear them while I work out. Is no ovulation and period the worst case scenario, or can you still ovulate and have a period but be extremely estrogen dominant? Well, most people that aren't ovulating are just storing up estrogen in their tissues. They tend to be pretty estrogen dominant. And once they start their period, that's why their periods are so rough for sometimes 6 months to a year. I've worked with clients who have hypothalamic amenorrhea, and then we finally work to get their period back. And once they get their period back, their periods are horrible and they're so estrogen dominant. So I would say it's better to be ovulating and making some progesterone than none at all. I have white spots on my front teeth. My dentist said it was lack of fluoride. I'm definitely not going to take that. LOL. Do you know what else can cause spots or how to fix? I personally think it has to do with minerals. I used to have really bad white spots on my teeth, and I don't have any anymore now that I think about it. Ever since I got my magnesium levels up. I don't know if it's that specifically, but yeah, I think that played a big role for me. The teeth have a lot to do with minerals and a lot to do with fat-soluble vitamins. So whenever there's teeth issues involved, and Dr. Stephen Lin wrote a book called Cure Tooth Decay. It's really worth reading, but just talks about the connection between fat-soluble vitamins, minerals, and how fat-soluble vitamins work to help the minerals get into the teeth, which are the hard tissues. And so we need the minerals, but we obviously need the things that allow them into the hard tissues. I have PCOS and experience rapid heavy heart rate when laying down at night, especially after eating. I take magnesium glycinate before bed, but still experience the palpitations. Any tips? A lot of times people need sodium and potassium. Many women that I've worked with that have PCOS, including myself, are very deficient in potassium. But it's important not to go crazy with potassium without getting sodium levels up and magnesium levels up. But I would say most people are just burning through potassium and magnesium very, very quickly. What would be sufficient to consume that's quick and easy before a workout? Also, is morning best time to work out? I personally think mid-morning or around midday is probably a good time to work out, maybe early afternoon. I personally don't like to work out right in the morning anymore. I used to love it. That was when I was so adrenaline addicted. But now I work more mid-morning, but not obviously everyone can do that. I work from home, but I would say a quick meal is Greek yogurt and stewed apples, like some sauteed apples. Like I would probably do something like that because it's just light. It will digest pretty quickly. And it also is like protein and carb. That's just one example. But yeah, I would say like the best time to work out is when you can fit it in. I just honestly don't believe that night workouts are a good idea. That's like the one time I think is like not a good time. Do you think FC Cytal is safe to take while pregnant? No, that's the problem with like antibacterials and why I like really encourage people, if they can, to get their gut issues figured out before they get pregnant, at least partially, because then once they're pregnant, like it really, you have to kind of wait until you're done breastfeeding for most herbs. There are certain like caveats to things, but I would say most herbal blends are not safe for pregnancy. 4 months into FN, did really well at first, but now I'm hitting a wall. Depression, extreme fatigue. Should I just write it out, or is there something I could do to help aid this? Progesterone oil? I mean, progesterone oil is always there. That's why I educate you guys about it. If you're tracking your cycle and you know you're ovulating, then and you know your luteal phase is lasting you 11 to 14 days, sometimes you really have to focus hardcore on detox. And I really do recommend like really supporting in that liver and getting that good fibers in. Like make sure you're doing plenty of a raw carrot salad. Sometimes you need to do 2 or 3 carrots. You need to work on really getting enough fiber, maybe doing some sauteed greens and some fats with meals, and make sure you're getting root vegetables, like stuff that's going to bind to the junk coming out of the liver. Because a lot of times that's what's happening. And if we're not pooping regularly and we're not getting that junk out, it can really take a toll on the gut, which of course can give us, brain fog, fatigue, make us feel moody, depressed. So that's important. But yeah, if progesterone is low, then usually that's gonna have us cause us a lot of problems. I love using perfumes or essential oils, but I'm afraid of the estrogenic effect. Any perfumes you recommend for other options? Thanks so much. I really like one called, oh my gosh, I'm losing it now. They're kind of expensive, and I don't know if they're that natural. They say they're natural, but it's called West by Ellis Brooklyn. Ellis Brooklyn perfumes, I really like them. They're expensive, but like, oh man, it smells so good. And I just make sure to spray perfume on my clothing. So if I'm using perfume, which I like, I think it makes me feel happy. I didn't use it for years, and now I like having signature scents. I really like using the Ellis Brooklyn perfumes. And then I like the ones at Target, which are not perfect by any means. They're called Good Chemistry. I really like them. They're kind of like fun. But again, they're like not perfect. So I just spray them on my clothes. But if I was like struggling with extreme estrogen dominance, I would be a little bit more careful with perfumes. But I know that like I'm okay. And so I get a little bit relaxed. But yeah, I'm careful about not getting them on my skin. After gaining healing weight, will our bodies just rebalance and lose it on its own? Are there other things we can help with weight loss aside appropriate exercise? Everyone's a little different. Some people just balance out with just like a good amount of exercise and just balancing their diet. Like everything kind of balances out. Gut health is a huge component. Like if you feel like weight is just lingering and not getting better, you feel puffy and inflamed, like a lot of times it does have to do with gut health and liver health. Those are kind of the 2 things that really need to be gotten into check. But yeah, I mean, if we're not losing weight with appropriate exercise and balance to our diet and sleep and light, then we probably are either eating just way too much, or maybe not the right balance of macronutrients. Sometimes we're eating a little bit too much fat in relationship to our protein and carbs. And then, like I said, gut and liver. Those are kind of the main things. And then if those are all really not working, which a lot of times people are like, okay, like those are all things I need to work on, then I do assess like, okay, are there foods that are just irritating your gut? Like, do you just not do well with gluten? Or do you just not do well with certain types of dairy? Or do you not do well with certain types of grains or whatever it might be? But yeah, I mean, Usually the body balances out, and if you're balancing your blood sugar, you're getting plenty of protein in, carbs from good sources, whole food sources. So if some people are like eating tons of bread and crackers and chips, and even though they're, with coconut oil and cassava, those are not going to be the same as getting plenty of roots and fruits. So those are sometimes like those things are sneaking in as well. And sometimes just cutting those things out in exchange for the more whole food sources really makes a difference in weight. What do you look for in a vitamin K supplement? Any good alternatives to Mitolife? I really like Innovix, Innovix. I also really like Just Thrive. I just look for a good blend of like MK4, MK7. I like Innovix because it's a fairly higher dose. I think it's at like 600 micrograms, which is higher for a supplement. Some supplements have very low dosage. So those are kind of my two favorites. Any thoughts on Vitex, chaste tree berry, or raspberry leaf for hormone balance? I have endo and have been prescribed bioidentical progesterone, but it makes me feel so sick. Yeah, so when progesterone makes us feel sick, we often we have really bad estrogen dominance. And estrogen dominance, it's kind of called that like estrogen flood effect. When women first start taking bioidentical progesterone and they have really bad estrogen dominance, they will flood estrogen out of their tissues. It's very important to support the liver. And it's very important to support the gut. If you haven't taken my Mender cycle course, you might learn a lot in that little mini class that I have. I even have like a lesson talking about bioidentical progesterone and why women feel sometimes worse before they feel better on it. You might learn a lot, but I like Vitex. I mean, I like raspberry leaf, but they're not the same as progesterone. And sometimes Vitex makes people feel worse because it acts on that pituitary gland. I'd love some tips on meals and snacks for my husband can take to work. He works from his car, so basically his office. Are there recommendations in your course? I mean, yeah, I would stick to like easy stuff. I have 2 recipe books in there. I mean, I would personally, like, if he can eat stuff cold, like tuna with some high quality crackers, hard-boiled eggs, anything that he can stick in a cooler, I mean, would work well, but I don't know what he likes to eat. I know a lot of guys are very different. What's realistic time frame for healing metabolism? Like 1 to 2 months for every year you were ill? I know there's no hard rule, but it's been 6 months and just starting to feel a difference. I would say like feel it's going to take 2 years to get where I want. Probably will. I mean, I think that it's a really good kind of like rule to keep in mind, to just put it into perspective for yourself. 1 to 2 months for every year you were not doing well. And a lot of times when we get real with ourselves, we're like, oh my gosh, I haven't been feeling well since I was born, or I haven't been feeling well since puberty. You know what I mean? So that's like a good amount of time. Like that's a good year or 2. And then if we did like really bad damage, like for example, for me, I was kind of on my healing journey for a really long time, 5 or 6 years. And towards the end, I was keto and low carb. And then I went pro-metabolic and I was so wrecked for like a year or 2. And there were certain things that I felt better doing. Like I felt better. I felt more energized. I felt more balanced, but my gut was so bad, which made my inflammation so bad. My energy was so bad. There were a lot of things that I had to heal from that because I was running on stress hormones for so long. Like I got used to feeling how it feels to run on stress. Raw dairy is just not easily accessible where I am, and I can't find non-homogenized anywhere either. Is there a next best thing, or should it be avoided if it's not raw or non-homogenized? I think it's just best to figure it out if that works for you. If that kind of dairy doesn't work for you, then you might need to avoid it. But if it works okay for you, then I wouldn't worry about it. What's your take on breathing exercises? I think breathing is very important. I think tongue posture is very important. I think posture is very important. Of course, I think that breathing is very important. Is it normal to feel hot in my lower abdomen during menstruation? Or is it, oh no, I lost myself. Is it normal to feel, where did it go? Is it normal to feel hot in my lower abdomen during menstruation, or is that a symptom signaling a bigger problem? I do think it's localized inflammation. I personally feel the same way, like a little bit warmer in that area, but I don't know if it's like, normal. I do think that for me, like I do feel like I'm just like emanating heat in that area, but prostaglandins do increase inflammation a little bit, and they're what's responsible for contracting the uterus. Where can I read more about pulse rates? I feel like I need to unlearn things. I think like Dr. Broda Barnes is a really great place to start. Dr. Ray Peat, like maybe go on the blog to functional performance systems and type in pulses. You'll learn a lot there. I think like heart rate variability is really important. Taking the context of the individual is important, but also looking at the history of where they got this like idea that low pulses are better. It's this idea that the slower our metabolism works, the longer we'll live. And so they were looking at like marathon runners, and they thought marathon runners are like the picture of health, right? And they were like, oh, marathon runners have like very low pulses. They're such amazing athletes. Like this must be the picture of health. And so therefore this low pulse rate idea was born. So it's just like kind of looking at like, how did they come to this idea in the first place that it was good for you? And then second of all, like, is that just because it's assumed doesn't mean it's correct. What's flushing a sign of? Is it histamine? Sometimes my face gets red after eating. Yeah, it's usually histamines. Like any type of heat intolerance, things like that. It can also be hypothyroidism or thyroid issues. How to go about treating suspected poor circulation? My feet and hands are constantly falling asleep and are tingling. Working on our metabolism, getting our circulation up, getting our blood flow up. Oftentimes people that have their hands and feet fall asleep a lot are really like they have low temperatures as well. They tend to. Just started raw carrot salad. It gives me flatulence and a bit of bloating. I love that word, flatulence. Tried it with MCT, coconut, and just carrot alone. Should I push through it and see if it goes away? Well, remember, it's very antibacterial, antifungal. If you have bacteria and fungus, it's going to really mess some things up for a while. Currently applying so many helpful things from your Mend Your Cycle program. Is there something I could do to minimize the crippling headache the day after my period while I work on progesterone balancing? I would be very good about supporting estrogen detox. So specifically working on like the detox lemonade would probably be effective. I know for me, like I get, and then making sure you don't get constipated. A lot of people get headaches when they get constipated. And when your estrogen is particularly high and you get constipated, that just causes that recirculating of estrogen. I know a lot of people that struggle with consistent headaches are very constipated. And then, for me, the detox lemonade almost always wipes my headache out when I drink one. So like liver health, making sure our bowels are moving just so that we are moving that estrogen out. Do you always recommend pairing eggs with orange juice? What are the benefits? Me? No, I mostly just pair eggs with some type of carb. I don't believe in eating protein alone because it lowers blood sugar too much, and then you have to have a stress reaction. Best tips for a male with estrogen dominance and endotoxins? I mean, I don't know, depending on what he's willing to implement. Like some men are like, just give me a supplement, I'll take it, but they won't do anything. If they'll do stuff, like make sure they're eating pretty pro-metabolic, not eating too many starches and PUFAs, doing a raw carrot salad every day. I think like men in particular who have endotoxin issues and aren't willing to do a lot, like can benefit from some activated charcoal a couple times a week. Those are kind of things that I focus on. How are you enjoying Under Luna shampoo? I really like it. It makes my hair a little bit flat, like not as curly as I would like it. I think it's kind of heavy, but I did get the like really moisturizing conditioner, so that could be why. But yeah, I really like it. My hair feels really clean. What are your thoughts on LASIK? Should that be avoided at all costs? Is it even possible to significantly improve vision naturally? I personally think like vision there's a lot of aspects of vision that are nutritional. Iron really damages the eye. Blue light really damages the eye. Polyunsaturated fats really damage the eye. But then at the same time, like it's really nice to be able to see. So I don't know. I mean, my eyes got significantly worse after I like megadosed fish oil and then went from keto to pro-metabolic. I think it was just I like destroyed my insulin sensitivity, even though like anyways. So my vision is really struggling right now, and it's slowly starting to get better with like vitamin E, all my nutrients, working on my iron, and Niacinamide has really helped me as well. But I may end up getting LASIK. I don't know. I'm just worried about my eyes' interaction with the sun and if it's going to damage my eyes' interaction with the sun. What causes frequent urination? Even when I drink just a few sips of water, I can already feel my bladder stimulating for years now. I pee about every hour. Usually high adrenaline is it's a diuretic. So people who are really stressed or have high stress hormones tend to pee a lot. Is it oils that are estrogenic or the plant itself? Like if I use pressed lavender leaves for a perfume, could it still be damaging? I mean, certain plants are estrogenic, but I would say like the oils are like super concentrated sources of those plants. Plus they're kind of volatile oils. So that like adds a, but I personally wouldn't stress about pressing lavender leaves and making a perfume. Like what the heck? Enjoy your life. You know what I mean? Like, I personally like don't stress about the little things. Like I think everyone, when I talk about stuff, they think that I have like a very black and white like view of things. And I'm just like telling you, like when I say beer is estrogenic, that doesn't mean that I don't drink beer ever. You know, like I just don't make a habit of drinking beer every day. Or if I was really struggling with estrogen dominance, like I would have really liked to know like something I was drinking every day was contributing to my problems. You know what I mean? So, you know, I don't have a very cut and dry view of nutrition anymore. I used to be very dogmatic, very judgmental, very orthorexic. And I just am not that way anymore. And that goes for everything. Like, heck, if I can't spray a little lavender plant on my skin, like, man, my life sucks, you know? How to get rid of parasites and yeast fungus while pregnant. Very difficult to do so. I mean, I would focus on the food part as much as I could, but once we're pregnant, we kind of have to wait it out. This is why, like, if you can, and of course, like, not everyone can. Some people are pregnant now. They've already had children. There's nothing we can do about it. But for the people that are planning on getting pregnant, just know that it's a good idea to sort out some issues, at least partially, before you have a baby, because you're still going to be dealing with them afterwards. So you might as well like work on it now. Is there any benefit to witch hazel as a toner? I personally don't like it because it dries out my skin, but I have really dry skin. But I think it can be beneficial for a lot of different applications. What can I do nutritional wise to get rid of perioral dermatitis, post-baby, estrogen dominant, I believe? I can't really tell you like what you could do nutritionally to get rid of it, but finding out why it's there in the first place is very helpful. A lot of people have dermatitis because they have really bad gut and liver issues. They're estrogen dominant. And so really just focusing on their metabolism first and foremost is very, very helpful. And getting them themselves out of that estrogen dominant state. And then we're starting to work on like, okay, supporting the liver, supporting the gut, those types of things. Thoughts on macadamia nuts? I love the texture and I miss having nuts in the diet. And I really recently read that they are low in PUFAs. Would you still avoid them? If they're raw, macadamia nuts are probably the best nut to consume just because they're grown in a more tropical climate oftentimes, like, you know, Hawaii. And they're higher in monounsaturated fat. So if I was going to consume a nut, it would be a macadamia nut. And I occasionally, I don't really like nuts. So I'm like the type of person where it doesn't really bother me, but I know for people that like nuts, like, you know, it's not a good idea to restrict something that you love. And macadamia nuts would be something that's, you know, benign. I was told I have Hashimoto's hypo last year and the doctor scared me and put me on levothyroxine right away. Then I switched to NP thyroid. Am I now dependent on meds? How do I know if I'm in remission? You know, when we have hypothyroidism, a lot of times we have a conversion issue, and depending on what labs you get run, like there's so many caveats to this. But, you know, if we have, for example, low T3, oftentimes we're not converting T4 into T3, which happens primarily in the liver or some in the gut. And there are factors in the gut that affect how it's converted in the liver. So so I'm just using that as an example. So taking thyroid hormone just increases our amount of thyroid hormone in the blood. It doesn't really fix any of the problems. It doesn't fix the fact that we're not converting. It doesn't fix the fact that our cells aren't uptaking it. And so, you know, everyone goes about it differently. Some people just keep eating pro-metabolic until they are like, oh, I'm kind of hyperthyroid now. Like, I feel like I don't need medication. And they go to their doctors and their doctors assess and say, oh, you know what? We got to lower your medication dose. That has happened plenty of times. Plenty of people who have started eating pro-metabolic eventually just say like, you know, I went to the doctor, I got my levels checked, and they said, you know what? We got to lower your dose. And then they kept lowering their dose and lowering their dose until they didn't need it anymore. That's probably the best way to go about it. I definitely can't recommend you to do that on your own without a doctor's supervision, just because it is a medication. But just being aware, like, of I am supporting my thyroid. I'm trying to get to the root of this and paying attention to if the thyroid medication is working for you anymore, and then getting that reassessed with the doctor. Any books you could recommend for learning about vitamins and minerals? Oh man, I have a lot of books on specific vitamins and minerals. It's kind of stressful, honestly, but sometimes I like to nerd out. I've been reading one on sodium bicarbonate. I'll have to post on my stories just a picture of all the books I have. I have a lot of books. It's kind of a sickness, honestly. But I really like learning about minerals, sodium bicarbonate, magnesium miracle, iron, the most toxic metal. I really have been loving learning about thiamine, vitamin B1 deficiency. Trying to think of, like, is there like a mineral book that I like? I've been learning a lot about cell salts. I recently got a book called Facial Diagnosis of Cell Salt Deficiencies. That's been very interesting. But yeah, there's a lot of books. I'll post a picture on my Instagram stories tomorrow, just so you can see like all the books in my bookcase. Not all of them are great. Like, some of them I'm just like, I just buy them because I want to learn more about a subject, and then I end up disagreeing with half the book, but it's still helpful to kind of learn about stuff. Any tips on varicose veins, especially during pregnancy? Vitamin E. Varicose veins are often due to estrogen dominance, and then can sometimes just be like pressure, like extra weight. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people use vitamin E. But I don't know if that's a good idea during pregnancy. Sometimes we have to wait until after to deal with them. Would you post the link for your blue light blocker glasses? I love their oversized. Yeah, for sure. I'll just post another link to them on my stories tomorrow. They're just DIFF. I get a bit of throbbing where my adrenals are. Can that be endotoxins or just the kidneys having a hard time filtering things? Middle of the backish. Adrenal throbbing can sometimes just happen when our adrenals are super overworked. Yeah, that happens pretty consistent. Like, that's like actually a regular occurrence. I learned when I was in my functional training, they were, talking about adrenal fatigue and like all of the signs that you can have adrenal fatigue and high adrenaline. And one of them was like adrenals aching. I'm new here. What do you think of the carnivore diet? Definitely new here. I don't think living off of meat is a good idea. And most women come to me when they hit the wall and now have to heal from all the problems they caused on the carnivore diet. How do you decide whether to take pregnenolone, progesterone, or thyroid hormone? Just depending on what the issue is. I think progesterone is like the first priority, because if we're not ovulating, then we're not making progesterone, and that's not blocking from the stress. 9 times out of 10, women's issues is that they're not making enough progesterone. They're very estrogen dominant. So progesterone to me is the priority, whether that's ovulating to make it or maybe getting a little bit in. Then once progesterone levels are good, then we can reevaluate, like, do we even need thyroid hormone? Do we even need pregnenolone? Because progesterone is thyroid stimulating. So a lot of people who are progesterone deficient are thyroid deficient. What's the best way to get rid of yeast overgrowth without having to eliminate sugar? You guys should watch my IGTV episodes on yeast and then re-listen to some of this live. I talk a lot about yeast in this live today. If you have stubborn antibodies issues, Hashimoto's, is it okay to take LDN? I'd love to solve things with diet only, but curious if taking LDN would also be okay. Yeah, I mean, low-dose naltrexone is a super interesting compound, and a lot of people have been helped by it. I experimented with it in the past. I had a doctor that put me on it years and years ago. It didn't really do much for me, but I know that there's a lot of people who have seen a lot of benefits from it for sure. My ferritin and hemoglobin has dropped really low my 3rd trimester, 7 and 10. My midwives want me to get an iron infusion. What would you do? I have been eating more liver. I would read post number 81 by Morley Robbins and say it's called Why You're Not Anemic in months 6 through 9 of pregnancy. Is estradiol the only estrogen produced by the body? No, there's three. There's estrone, which is E1, the estrogen made in our tissues and our fat cells. We have estradiol, which is E2, and then estriol, which is produced mostly in the ovaries. It tends to be like pretty high during pregnancy, but yeah, there are three estrogens. There's actually more, but those are like the three main. Is there a correlation between dairy aggravating cramps and fungus? It can. If you have high histamine or you already have fungal issues, it can sometimes make those issues worse. Is panthenol good to avoid in skincare products? I think it may be a synthetic B vitamin. I know that pantothenic acid is vitamin B5. I've never heard of panthenol. Do you know if having a very toned pelvic floor, meaning it's overactive and always tense, could contribute to cramps? For sure. I think it can contribute to a lot of reproductive issues. Just because it's, think about like tensing a muscle, like your bicep constantly. You're just clenched all the time. Eventually your shoulder's going to hurt, your arm's going to hurt, maybe your chest is going to hurt. Like, it's not just going to affect the bicep, it's going to affect the surrounding areas. For someone with unexplained rashes on legs, feet, and joint pain, swelling, especially in hands, are there any foods or supplements you would avoid and are focus on? I would get a gut test and figure out what's going on in my gut. A lot of times there's like dysbiosis, fungal bacteria issues happening. Oh, I love you. Any advice on growing hair past the shoulders? Since I was a kid, my hair has never been longer than my shoulders. I have PCOS, 2 adrenals, and 1. Get stressed down, nourish the body, and give it a few months, if not years. A lot can happen in year, when you actually turn your focus to nourishment. I love going on big hikes and bike rides, but I don't want to put my body through excess stress with the cardio anymore. Any tips for supporting the body if you're going to be doing sustained cardio? I would make sure I had like baby food packs of carbs and possibly protein powder or something like that. And I would probably be eating every 2 hours, even if it's just like that, like baby food or applesauce or something. Like, I would not be going on long cardio sessions without like implementing foods. Recommendations for vaginal yeast. I'm miserable. Well, there are so many factors to vaginal yeast. Like, if we have yeast infections that are chronic, usually there's like gut issues. Estrogen is usually a play. Like, a lot of women who are very estrogen dominant or on the hormonal birth control pill, those types of things tend to have a lot of yeast infections. But getting to the bottom of why they're happening is helpful. But I really like, for me, what works very quickly for me is Vitanica's yeast arrest suppositories or boric acid suppositories. Like the honey pot ones at Target work really well for me, and easily take care of stuff. I love the raw carrot salad, but I've been a bit lazy lately and started snacking on baby carrots with the apple cider and the little salt. Does this also work, or do the carrots have to be shredded? Just FYI, I try to not bring this up too much because it destroys people's sense of reality, but baby carrots are not baby carrots. They're just deformed large carrots that have been ground up and then put into a baby carrot formation and soaked in chlorine so they don't rot. So just like FYI, even the organic ones. But yes, I mean, and eating them however we want to eat them is a good way. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on taking edibles for anxiety? Also, during weight loss journey, would it affect weight loss and health in general? Yeah, I do think that making the liver, because when you eat THC containing products, it forces the liver to turn it into a more potent form of THC. So I do think it has an effect on the liver. It's kind of hard on the liver. And then, marijuana in general just does increase stress hormones. Plus, it's very high in cadmium. Just marijuana pulls a lot of heavy metals from the soil just naturally. And so I see this a lot, but people that smoke weed or, intake THC products over the course of a long period of time tend to have a lot of heavy metals that they have to dump over time. Specifically cadmium comes to mind. But yeah, I think like occasional use is probably not going to affect us that much, but long-term consistent use is of course going to affect our hormones. Asked this in the Facebook group yesterday, but can't find the live. Been on SIBO antibacterials for 4 months. How do you know when you've been on antibacterials for too long and when to start the healing phase? Yeah, so I answered that question yesterday, and it's in the videos section. But if you've been on antibacterials for 4 months and things haven't changed, that's like a good sign that it's not the bacteria that's the problem. Being on antibacterials for 4 months is a really long time. I personally have never heard a functional protocol that goes that long without breaks. I've been taught, even by like the most aggressive of practitioners, that someone should take a break every 4 weeks. And if going like trying to kill bacteria is not working, it's probably fungus or there's probably other things at play. So that's just my personal opinion. Like, I personally don't take antibacterials for a long period of time because just wiping bacteria out over and over and not restructuring the microbiome, things are just going to grow back. When we create space, we're just creating space for other things to grow. But how do we know if we've been on them for too long? If we're taking something consistently and nothing else is changing. Maybe TMI, sorry. So what are your thoughts on mild to intense pressure in the vaginal canal day 1 of period? Is this normal? No uterine cramps though. I'm not really sure. Like, I think everyone's period is a little different. Sometimes I wonder if the uterus is inflamed a little bit. Like, I always feel like my uterus is pooched out a little more, regardless of how asymptomatic my period is. I do feel like that area just kind of retains a little bit more water. Like, I just have a little bit more of that like uterine pooch. And I do think that there is some localized inflammation. I do think that there is some some stuff going on there, and there is, like, the uterus is cramping. So I think having some weird things going on in that area is normal. I just don't think it should be like uncomfortable or painful. I think that that's kind of where, okay, like, we should ask what's going on. What is your Chinese zodiac animal sign? Happy year of ox. I don't know. What is your Western astrology sign? You come up as a Libra. I only know my Western astrology sign, and I'm a Cancer. So that's like all I know. I don't know what my Chinese zodiac animal sign is. OMG, thanks for letting me know about the baby carrots. Had no idea. Also, thanks for answering all my other weird questions. I love weird questions. It always makes me think. Started having histamine issues when I started treating SIBO and mold, wondering what to do to fix that. Well, see, a lot of times this happens. See, like, we start to wipe out bacteria that are histamine degrading, and now we got to go and re-implement histamine degrading bacteria. This is why I think practitioners are way, way too aggressive with the antibacterials. They just have this like wipe it out mentality, not realizing that, yeah, you got to wipe out SIBO, but you also have to, you don't want to wipe out all your bacteria. You have specific strains that you need in the colon that just don't belong in the small intestine. And this is the caveat with SIBO, is like, those are bacteria strains that do belong in the body. They just don't belong in the small intestine. And so it's really getting the stomach producing stomach acid again, the pancreas producing enzymes, the gallbladder producing bile, the liver functioning really, really well, and really activating the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve will stimulate the migrating motor complex to really squeeze that tube, which is that small intestine, and get that bacteria out and restore the function of the ileocecal valve. And if somebody's trying to treat your SIBO and they've never brought up the ileocecal valve, go look it up and do some research on it. It's that one-way valve in between the small intestine and the large intestine that opens up to allow what's in the small intestine into the large intestine without allowing bacteria into the small intestine. 9 times out of 10, people who have bacterial overgrowth have ileocecal valve dysfunction, where that valve is just swinging open. And interestingly enough, stress hormones make us eat our tendons and ligaments, the same proteins that make up our valves. Interesting. So I think people's valves get really, really weak when they're under stress. So that's my long way of saying that SIBO is stress-induced bacterial overgrowth, and just pounding antibacterials usually actually causes more problems. Do you think it's bad to mix food and drink? I've heard some people say it can cause gut dysbiosis. I don't really think that you should drink a ton of water or cold beverages while you are eating, like a little bit of warm tea, those types of things. All right, you guys, one more question, and then I'm going to end this. It's gone way too long already. I tried to get through all your questions. I know I probably have missed a few, but I want to keep this short for the people that are listening. What would you say the diet is the strongest link correlated with bad mental health? For example, depression and anxiety. Yeah, I would say the diet is a big factor because the gut plays a big role. But then hormones can be a close second for sure. All right, you guys, I love you so much. Thank you so much for joining us for this live, and I'll see you next week on Wednesday at 5 p.m. PST. Thank you for bringing all your questions. Thank you for your time, and I can't wait until next time.